It all starts with a Go player holding a piece, wondering if that was really all there was to it. He places the piece on the board decisively, the dry sound echoing through the quiet room. On the other side, a man wearing dark glasses prepares for his next move by picking up a piece. The confrontation continues with another precise move that strikes the wooden board with force. The man in dark glasses realizes, startled, that his opponent has just made a move that defies all logic. In the blink of an eye, all the pieces are swept from the board in an aggressive and chaotic manner. He despairs at that unbelievable move that should never exist in a game of Go. It is at that moment that a young man appears, smiling darkly and completely covered in red. As several men run in desperation, it becomes clear that everything had been wrong from the very first instant. The story then goes back 10 years in time to reveal how it all really began. In that past, we meet one Do-yoon, a 9-year-old boy with a serious and striking gaze. He lives in one of the poorest and most forgotten neighborhoods in the region, observing the harsh reality around him. Beside him is one A-yoon, his 8-year-old little sister, who faces the worst possible difficulties. The calm of the place is broken when a soccer ball is kicked with full force through the skies. The boys shout for no one to let the ball fall at one Do-yoon's feet, trying to stop his advance. They run in desperation, shouting to block the boy and grab his clothes if necessary. Even with the pressure, Do-yoon runs at high speed with determination to win the challenge. The ball flies too fast, passing right by the boy who tries to defend it and colliding against the wall. Annoyed, one of the boys complains loudly about what kind of goalkeeper simply dodges a ball like that. The ball keeps rolling away while the street game is interrupted by everyone's frustration. The young Do-yoon finds himself trapped at rock bottom with few prospects for improvement in his life. He is just the weakest and most vulnerable link in a world completely consumed by daily hardship. The rival boy decides to stop the game, saying that is enough for today because his parents will be looking for him soon. Do-yoon walks away coldly, warning that he has already played with them and demanding they not disturb him in his territory again. Suddenly, a foot appears, stepping firmly on a stone, while a mocking voice comments on the boy's attitude. That man is Kim Moo-won, the influential leader of a small local criminal organization called Gunilpa. He kicks a stone in Do-yoon's direction and tells him to stop complaining and accompany him willingly. The small boy stops the stone with his foot without effort and responds calmly that is enough. Do-yoon stares at the man seriously and warns him that he does not want to owe anything to him from now on. With an ironic smile, Moo-won gestures, saying that the boy loves to say exactly what he does not want to hear. Do-yoon remains silent, with his back turned, under the tension of the presence of that dangerous man who watches him. Without many options, the young man turns and asks where exactly they are going now. Moo-won responds that they are going to his warehouse, while A-yoon watches the two from afar at the top of the stairs. Do-yoon asks what kind of house that is, and the man explains that it is a home where there is absolutely nothing. It is clear that Moo-won is someone different and that he definitely does not belong to that humble place. Upon entering the place, which is messy and empty, the man simply tells them to sit in any corner. He enters, complaining that bringing 2 children made him hungry, but Do-yoon retorts that he is not hungry, opening a package of instant noodles with his teeth. Moo-won makes it clear that it was he who was hungry and not the children. Showing the packages of food, the man tells Do-yoon to start working by organizing the clothes scattered there. Do-yoon remains silent, staring at the man with distrust, while his little sister watches behind him. Moo-won turns around intrigued and notes that the amount of mess in the place is even greater than last time. With a friendly smile, he promises to pay a little more, complaining about how the boy manages to be so demanding. The boy starts to collect the clothes from the floor and prevents his sister from helping, warning that is his job. While collecting the pieces, Do-yoon wonders internally if that would really be all he needed to do. At that moment, Moo-won reappears with a hot pot and calls the 2 siblings to eat together. He puts the meal on the table, explaining that eating is also part of the work and that they should act like guests. With a calmer countenance, the man comments sincerely that meals were not made to be eaten alone. Do Yoon's stomach grows with hunger, and he accepts, asking the man to just deduct the value from his daily wage. Moo-won rests his hand on the boy's head, impressed by how proud and direct that child is. Looking at his cell phone, he warns the young man to be very careful and to check the route well before going out to the street. While his sister eats quietly, the boy reflects on the tasks imposed, knowing that all of that is just work. Moo-won observes the young man's behavior and advises him not to overdo the training, even if it is to evolve. Do-yoon starts to eat quickly with chopsticks, making the man sigh with amusement at his haste. The man watches the boy devouring the food and begins to wonder what kind of person he will become when he grows up. Do-yoon trains hard with Chu-dong, seen Moo-won's right-hand man, who used to be a professional mixed martial arts fighter. The routine of intense training continues firmly in the Gnilpa criminal organization that dominates that humble area of the neighborhood. The boy tries his best, with a determination shining intensely in his eyes. During every practiced blow, Dong Seon realizes that that pair of siblings is very different from all the other people he has ever met in his life. Focused and tireless, the small boy throws quick punches in the air, demonstrating an uncommon willpower. Every attack from the young man hits the mitts with impressive precision, which surprises the experienced fighter. Dong Seon observes the boy with a discreet smile on his face. Proud of the constant evolution of that little student, he gives hard-boiled eggs to Do-yoon to strengthen his body while protecting him from the threats of other gangs in the region. Do-yoon looks at the eggs in his sweaty hands, breathing deeply after another day of exhausting training. The boy continues to do push-ups on the street, under the watchful eye of Dong, seen while his little sister watches from afar. The physical exhaustion is extreme, but the young man refuses to give up, enduring the pressure with great willpower. He focuses all his energy on combat training, evolving quickly with each new punch thrown with force. Besides training hard, the boy also works hard, running through the streets to deliver newspapers. Even with the exhausting routine, the young man still finds time to study while the gang leader rests on the sofa. The boy keeps every coin earned with great effort, putting his savings inside a plastic bottle. The water bottle full of coins and crumpled bills represents all his daily sacrifice to survive. Time passes and the young man grows up, facing the daily difficulties of school with his worn-out and dirty uniform. Do-yoon, now older and more serious, reflects that it was precisely with this harsh reality that he learned to endure everything. He walks alone through the hallways while listening to the constant whispers and the judgmental looks of the other students. The young man thinks that if his parents were alive, he would never need to carry such a heavy burden so soon. Do-yoon lets out a sigh of fatigue as he enters the sports gym, seeking to focus on training to forget the problems. He runs across the soccer field, showing all the skill and speed that he developed over years of training. At the moment when the young man finally begins to feel a hint of hope, fate decides to test him once again. The coach calls him in a harsh manner, bringing up the difficult moment for which the young man was already prepared. Do-yoon turns, surprised, while the other students continue running across the lawn without paying attention to the conversation. The coach in dark glasses asks what is happening with him lately, questioning if his body is feeling heavy. The man warns coldly that he heard that the young man will have to sit out the team's next important game. With a discouraged and resigned look, Yoon confirms the news, accepting the unfair decision without complaining. He lowers his head in a melancholic way and simply agrees, saying that he has really been feeling very tired. The young man knows very well that the real problem is not the fatigue, but the money that others pay to play. Do-yoon walks towards the school's storage room, believing that walking away from that unfair situation is the best option. His sister A-yoon, now older, studies at the same school. While he realizes that the sport is not fair at all, he opens the padlock of the place, determined to leave that team without carrying any kind of regret in his chest. Suddenly, a group of boys approaches, and one of them yells, calling the young man an orphan in an extremely mean way. The boys start to laugh loudly and mock in a cruel way the fact that he does not have parents to support him financially. The leader of the group is Wang Sung-hyuk, the arrogant son of a director of the gigantic and dangerous Daejeong organization. Do-yoon faces the provocations in silence with a cold look while the spoiled rich kid asks if he thinks he is special. Sung Hayek laughs sarcastically, stating that he just does not play because he is a broke kid who has no family to help him. He points to the other players on the field, humiliating the young man for being the only one who does not have money to pay for the spot. Without wanting to prolong the conflict, Do-yoon just thanks him for the information and remains focused on putting away the equipment. The young man puts the padlock on the iron gate firmly, trying to ignore completely the presence of the bullies. Sung Hyuk is extremely annoyed by the lack of reaction from the young man, who simply pretends he does not exist. Dune finishes locking the place and prepares to leave, ignoring the silly insults of that spoiled group. Unconvinced, the rich boy pushes Do-yoon's head with his finger to try to start a physical fight by force. He yells furiously, saying that he finds it disgusting how the young man acts, as if he were much better than everyone there. The spoiled kid continues yelling insults very close to his ear, stating that he would never step onto that soccer field. Sung Hyuk continues humiliating the young man, yelling that he will never be anyone and calling him a useless parasite. He points his index finger directly at Do-yoon's head, trying to destabilize him in every way. The bully throws in the boy's face that his attitude is the main culprit for him not having parents nowadays. With a sarcastic smile on his face, he asks in a mocking way if the young man lost his speech before the insults. Sung Hyuk delivers a kick to Do-yoon's back, cursing the young man and trying to humiliate him even more in front of everyone. That the boy endures the pain in silence, while thinking that true ignorance is in the attitude of those bullies. With hatred shining intensely in his red eyes, he realizes that the rival only acts like that because his father is a gangster. Without thinking twice, Do-yoon reacts violently and lands a brutal headbutt directly on Sung Hyuk's face. The accurate blow makes the bully's nose bleed a lot, leaving him completely stunned and fallen on the patio floor. Do-yoon watches the rival bleed on the floor and thinks that he must continue acting with ignorance to get beaten even more. The boy displays a dark and frightening look, showing that he will not feel any guilt for what he will do next to his rival. Taken by fury, Do-yoon starts to kick the fallen adversary mercilessly, without giving him any chance of reaction. Every strong kick against the rival fallen on the floor resembles a violent kick delivered against a soccer ball. He lands a last devastating blow on the boy's head and thinks that both he and his gangster father will pay dearly. The force of the aggression is compared to the violent impact of a ball hitting the back of the goal net with extreme violence. The other students and the coach himself are completely shocked and terrified by the boy's brutality. The coach widens his eyes and starts to yell in desperation upon realizing the seriousness of the mess that just happened. Do-yoon stares at the bloodied rival on the floor with an evil look and warns coldly that that will be his only break. A few days pass and the young man is now in a meeting room, surrounded by the school's directors and teachers. The board starts to read the report about the violent fight that the boy had with the other student on the school patio. The director with glasses warns coldly that the school has decided to expel Do-yoon permanently after what happened. Dissatisfied with the injustice, the boy questions the reason for only him being punished if the others started the aggression. He wonders furiously if the punishment occurs because he does not have parents, money, or someone powerful to defend him. Do-yoon points out that the school is only punishing him because Sung Hyuk's family has the powerful Daejeong faction behind them. The director closes his mouth in a harsh manner, demonstrating that he has no arguments to counter the harsh truth spoken by the young man. With a cynical smile on his face, the young man realizes that the school really taught him a very valuable lesson about life. He turns his back and leaves, determined to live using exactly the same rules of power from then on. Walking alone through the streets at sunset, the young man reflects on how that world was always dominated by gangs. These gangster groups extorted money from local residents under the false pretext of offering protection for the neighborhood. With this false armed peace spreading through the streets, marginalized people like him only continued to grow in number. Meanwhile, Sung Hyuk walks, scared and crying in desperation, after being humiliated and defeated in such a brutal way. The spoiled boy sobs, hiding his bruised face with his arm, while the night falls over the city. The sunset colors the sky of Guncham, revealing the melancholic and tense climate that took over that entire neighborhood. Observing the blood stains on his clothes, the young man accepts the fact of having reached that extreme situation. Yoon stares at the horizon with a cold countenance, knowing very well what course his life must take from now on. He knows that his path was totally manipulated from the beginning, but now he is ready to change his destiny. Back in the present, the young man encounters a metal door stained with red at the criminal organization's headquarters. By pushing the door, he plans to destroy everyone, from the biggest mobsters to the small delinquents who operate on the corners. The young man descends the stairs decisively, ready to settle all his old accounts exactly as he planned. He enters the gang's lair, Gunilpa, willing to use the same relentless logic of power that they have always used against others. Won, now with a beard and a more mature look, asks ironically what is wrong with the young man's eyes. The gang's henchmen watch the quiet arrival of the young man, who now behaves in a cold and intimidating way. Without saying a single word, the young man throws his heavy backpack directly on the floor, making a thunderous noise. He opens the bag, revealing gallon-sized containers full of money, and states that that amount is double everything he owed them. One stares at the young man, surprised, and retorts, saying that he does not remember lending even a single coin to him. Yoon explains coldly that that amount covers all the times the man gave him food and tasks in the past. Irritated, the gang leader says he does not want that money and tells the young man to stop talking nonsense and leave there. The young man clenches his fist with force, insisting that that payment is the final settlement for him to end his past. One stands up with anger and threatens him, saying not to mistake his education for weakness if he wants to stay alive. Yoon remains firm and unshakable before the death threat, staring at the leader and stating that he has something to say. One stares at the boy seriously, analyzing deeply every detail of that bold proposal. Yoon bows deeply before the mafia leader and asks him to officially adopt him as his son. In exchange, the young man promises to give the gangster the only thing he always wanted in life but could never reach. Silence takes over the room while all the henchmen watch the young man bowed, waiting for their leader's response. One keeps his eyes fixed on the boy, trying to decipher what are the real intentions behind that drastic attitude. The man comments in a thoughtful way that he always wondered how the boy would grow up, but realizes that only the body has changed. He adjusts himself on the sofa and asks, ironically, if the young man really knows what he wants to conquer most in that world. With total conviction, the young man responds directly that the gangster's greatest desire is to become the supreme leader of Gunilpa. Yoon lifts his head with a determined look and promises that next time he will bring the leader to him in any way. The young man guarantees firmly that he never broke any promise in his life, acting exactly like the man in front of him. One smiles, finding it funny how the young man appeared suddenly, acting with so much formality and saying such absurd things. He questions the young man about the reason for having gone there, knowing very well that he would receive an immediate refusal. As in an answer, Yoon points firmly to the floor and states with conviction that he came there simply because that was destined to happen. The man is surprised by such determination and wonders internally the reason for having been chosen among so many people. The young man stares back at him with his red eyes shining and asks if there is any other person capable of controlling him. Yoon adds firmly that besides Won, no one else has the capacity to take down the powerful Daejeong faction. Won hears that with distrust and asks what makes the young man believe that he is capable of destroying such a giant group. The young man displays a discreet smile on his face and reveals that he saw with his own eyes the man and his henchmen fighting in the past. The memory refers to the moment when Yoon arrived for the first time at the city hall of that humble district. On that rainy night, the young man witnessed Won's gang preparing for a brutal confrontation against its rivals. Even though they were in the minority, with only 5 trusted men, the group advanced without showing a single bit of fear. In fact, only 2 members of the gang were enough to start a true massacre against the crowd of enemies. The henchmen of the rival faction, Daejeong, who gathered at that place, were completely taken by surprise by the aggressiveness. The confrontation was extremely violent, with Wan's allies using hammers and fists to crush the adversaries. Brutal blows were delivered without any mercy, making the rivals' blood gush onto the dark floor of the alley. Dong Xin used all his overwhelming physical strength to knock out any enemy who dared to get in his way. Wan fought in a surgical and lethal way, neutralizing the targets quickly with precise and fatal movements. The violent battle continued in the rain, with the small gang completely destroying dozens of rival henchmen. The screams of despair and pain of the defeated opponents echoed through the dark alley while the massacre was consolidated. The young man remembers that the man and his allies were so relentless that they did not even give the enemies the chance to run away from there. Hidden behind a wall, Do-yoon watched that whole frightening scene beside his little sister without being able to forget it. That brutal demonstration of absolute power deeply marked the mind of the young boy, who watched everything fascinated. The silhouette of the two victorious warriors remained engraved in Do-yoon's memory as the true peak of strength. In the present, Mo-won listens to the story thoughtfully and asks in a skeptical way if that confrontation really happened that way. His trusted men who are in the room listen to everything in silence, surprised by the details revealed by the young man. One of the subordinates confirms the story, remembering that Choi Daeop had sent several workers to attack them at that time. One tries to cut the explanation, but Do-yoon interrupts him, saying that everything that needed to be explained has already been said. The young man turns to leave and warns the gangsters that he only said all that to make his intentions very clear beforehand. He opens the lair's door firmly and guarantees that he has no more intention of stopping the plan he just started. Do-yoon leaves the place, slamming the metal door with force and making a loud rumble echo throughout the meeting room. Dong Xin asks the leader what he intends to do now. While the leader remains thoughtful about what he just heard, the fighter warns that the boy is not someone reliable, and that for a small organization the danger of betrayal is huge. One lays his head on the sofa in a relaxed way and comments that it has been a long time since his ally disagreed with his decisions. The gang leader ponders that no criminal organization would be capable of controlling a young man with such determination and fury. He sighs while lying on the sofa, thinking that daring and audacious boy could have waited a little longer to act. Wan reflects that he raised the boy as if he were his own son, but never imagined that he would really ask to be adopted. He remembers when the little Do-yoon said with innocence that his biggest dream was to become exactly like him in the future. The image of the little boy running and shouting that he wanted to be strong like his adoptive father comes to the gangster's mind in a nostalgic way. Back in reality, the henchmen comment that the young man is definitely not an ordinary person due to his bizarre attitudes. One adjusts himself on the sofa, repeating the boy's words in thought. Still intrigued by the idea of adopting him as his son, One opens a cardboard box in his office, commenting to himself that it has been quite a long time since all that. He looks nostalgically into the box, which contains old photos, notebooks, and some of Do-yoon's objects. The man pulls a crumpled paper from the bottom of the box, remembering striking moments from that young boy's past. The story advances, revealing Wan's transition to the official position of manager of the design team of the Huxiong company. The memory of a terrible funeral with funeral portraits decorated with flowers highlights the tragedy that occurred recently. The young Do-yoon attends the funeral wearing a black suit with a deeply dejected and sad countenance. The situation becomes complicated after a series of operational failures and negligence committed by One at the Huxiong company's headquarters. The organization's directors are furious with the bad results caused by the manager's rebellious attitudes. An official transfer notification is issued, determining Wan's demotion to take care of a smaller branch. Without choices, the man packs his things in a box and leaves the main building under the judgmental looks of his colleagues. Even demoted, Mo-won maintains his firm posture, leading his loyal subordinates, who accompany him to the new position. The team's new base of operations is an abandoned office in terrible conditions in a humble district of Gangong. Despite the precarious situation, the man carries his box with a confident smile, determined to get back on his feet. The henchmen start carrying carrying the old furniture into the new office. While performing a general cleaning, One enters the new room, carrying his things, ready to restart his work leading the small team. He holds the official document of his transfer in his hands, analyzing the order that sent him back to that humble neighborhood. With much anger and accumulated frustration, the man crumbles the board's paper with force, destroying the notice with his own hands. He sits alone on the office sofa, reflecting tiredly on the new challenges he will face ahead. The man hides his face with his hands, but his bright blue eyes demonstrate that he still plans something very big. Letting out a long sigh, the gangster tries to calm down while staring at the moving boxes scattered on the room's floor. He admits to himself that Yoon is an intriguing boy who does not leave his thoughts for several reasons. The office's calm is interrupted by insistent knocks on the door, calling the gang leader's attention. On the other side, a familiar voice warns that it is the subordinate Song Jae, who just arrived at the location bringing news. The ally enters the room in a respectful way, asking for permission to speak directly to his manager. Song Jae warns that he brought some medicine for the leader while observing him from afar in the improvised office. Upon seeing One sitting on the floor drinking, the man approaches, concerned, and asks what really happened. He reveals that Yoon was expelled from school after beating up the spoiled kids of the rival faction. One serves a drink to his ally, commenting that explosion of fury by the boy was something inevitable to happen. The gang leader asks in a harsh manner if the little sister Yoon was also involved in that mess at school. Song Jae confirms and explains that the boy endured the bullying in silence for a long time before finally losing control. The ally toasts with the leader and asks what they intend to do now that Yoon has caught the attention of dangerous people. He warns that if an obstinate young man like Yu does not join them, he will end up entering an even worse path. One drinks a sip of the drink directly from the bottle and ponders if it would not be better to welcome the boy before the worst happens. The leader questions if the other important members of the gang also agree with this decision to recruit the boy. Song Jae comments on Dong's stubbornness, who has been insisting a lot on training the young man and turning him into a warrior. The ally expresses his doubts, questioning if Yoon would really accept that kind of criminal life in a peaceful way. He believes that the best for the boy would be to keep him nearby under supervision to avoid him getting lost in crime. One smiles at his friend's careful analysis, praising the always very rational way with which he evaluates problems. The mafia leader states that he wishes to discover exactly what goes through Yoon's mind before making any decision. He asks seriously who is the henchman responsible for monitoring the boy's steps on the streets. Currently, Song Jae takes his cell phone and suggests calling Yeom Do-jin to order the young man to appear immediately at the office. One agrees with his head and orders him to hurry before Yoon ends up going after the dangerous Choi Dae-up. The manager gestures for his ally to make the call quickly, demonstrating haste in resolving that delicate situation. Over the phone, Yeom Do-jin answers the call and confirms directly that he is already at home monitoring the region. Song Jae instructs the henchman to go to the location personally while Yoon's silhouette walks through the city's dark streets. The young Yoon displays a red and intimidating look focused on his secret goal of revenge against the mafia. In a bright tavern, henchmen of the factions celebrate the transfer of their leader to the organization's main headquarters. The gang's brute praises the place and orders his men to keep drinking and celebrating that great victory. Outside, the subordinates comment with pride that Daejeong is a gigantic faction and very respected in the country. The brute leader decides to walk back alone, alleging that no one would be crazy enough to attack him in his own territory. The henchman bows, thanking his leader for taking him along on the transfer to the faction's main headquarters. That man is Koide Yip, the dangerous leader of the Gunripa gang who controls the entire humble district of Guncheong. He walks, irritated, grumbling that he spent years in that forgotten place and that he does not see reasons for celebration. The mafia leader complains that he was demoted in the past to operate in the worst neighborhood of that poor region. Yip curses, furious for having been forced to waste time leading small street delinquents in that place. He grumbles that this sudden then transfer back to the faction's main headquarters. Seems just like a tasteless joke. The man stops in the dark alley to relieve himself while continuing to grumble about his discontent with his superiors. He curses, irritated, questioning the size of the problem that the faction's board is trying to push onto him. The mobster complains, saying that the neighborhood's situation was much better when the local police were more active in the region. He adjusts himself and turns back, impatient with all that frustrating situation he is being forced to face. Upon picking up a pack of cigarettes, the man notices a strange presence and asks in a harsh manner what is happening there. His henchman approaches, concerned, offering a lighter and commenting that the leader drank too much at the tavern's celebration. Yep gives a friendly slap on the ally's back and suggests that they have one more drink before finally leaving. Suddenly, a cold voice coming from the darkness calls for the name of Choi Dae, interrupting their relaxed moment. The two mobsters look, surprised, in the direction of the end of the dark street, where they spot a mysterious silhouette standing under the pole. The young Do Yoon walks slowly in the direction of the criminals with calm steps, but demonstrating extreme determination. With his red eyes shining in an intimidating way, the young man repeats the mafia leader's name, demanding his immediate attention. The henchman lights the leader's cigarette and asks, mockingly, what the young man brought of so important to disturb the conversation. The ally displays a sadistic smile on his face and asks for permission to resolve that annoyance personally with violence. Yep walks right past his subordinate and tells him to forget that, assuming control of the situation from then on. The gang leader approaches the young man, blowing the cigarette smoke, and asks in a harsh manner who he thinks he is. Upon looking closer, the man is quite surprised to realize that the mysterious invader is just a teenager. He questions what a child is doing on the street at that hour of the night, irritating adults and ruining the mood of those who work. Yap tells the young man to vanish from there immediately before the drink's effect passes and things get really ugly. He warns in an intimidating way that when he loses patience, he never resolves his problems using only words. The tension increases in the dark alley with the three men standing under the weak light of the neighborhood's streetlights. Upon noticing that the young man does not move, the mobster asks in a harsh manner if he really does not intend to leave there willingly. Yoon stares at him seriously and responds decisively that he is there only to recover something that belongs to him by right. The young man warns with total coldness that they need to talk seriously to resolve that pending issue once and for all. Yap finds the young man's audacity funny and repeats the word in a mocking way, doubting they have anything to dialogue about. The young man explains that he went there in search of fair justification that the man had said was necessary in the past. The mobster argues that large organizations control everything and that gangs no longer fight each other without a strong reason. Yoon adjusts the watch on his wrist and retorts ironically, questioning since when do criminals care about rules or limits. The young man reinforces that it was precisely for this reason that he went there to find the ideal justification for the conflict. He details that he worked 3 years for the gang, but did not receive even 20% of the amount due, generating that dispute. The young man states with conviction that his charge is based on real facts, serving perfectly as the reason for his action. Yup starts to laugh loudly upon realizing that everything boils down to money and warns that that is not the correct place for such a charge. The man mocks the boy, telling him to complain about the lack of payment directly to his old teachers. The monster turns his back and tells the young man to stop thinking he is important, ordering him to vanish before he gets hurt. The young man retorts coldly, saying that if it were to retreat before a silly threat, he would never have gone to that location. Yap gets irritated and calls the young man crazy, questioning if he really knows the real meaning of a war justification. The mafia leader turns again with an extremely aggressive countenance, ready to discharge all his fury on the boy. He yells furiously that the ideal justification in the mafia requires the sacrifice of several lives, or even hundreds of people. The man throws his lit cigarette butt on the floor with violence, demonstrating that he completely lost all patience. He rants furiously, questioning if the young man really thinks that a blood justification can be created because of coins. Diep reinforces with hatred that there is absolutely nothing in that district that can help the boy in his foolish charge. He points to the police symbol on the wall, stating with scorn that the young man will not find help in any other place. The mobster unbuttons his blazer, commenting that he only tolerated the young man's audacity until there for being the first to speak without fear. Dayepe warns that the game is over, but Do-yoon mocks, saying that people usually talk too much when they are drunk. Scratching his head, the young man concludes, ironically, that his personal situation really would not be enough to start the fight. Do-yoon stares at the mobster seriously and asks what he has to say about human trafficking of orphans in the region. The memory returns to the past when the young Do-yoon was studying alone in his room and heard suspicious footsteps in the hallway. Suddenly, a loud rumble coming from the outside scares the boy, who immediately interrupts his reading. Upon looking out the window, he spots a group of kidnappers complaining about having to abandon a child there. One of the criminals opens the neighbor's room door with a sadistic smile, celebrating having found a new victim. He encounters a little boy, scared and crying under the sheets, celebrating the high profit he will have with that sale. The kidnapper grabs the child's hair with force, demanding that he shut his mouth so as not to spoil the valuable merchandise. The henchmen start to gag the boy and tie his wrists with tape to avoid any attempt at escape. The accomplice prepares the equipment quickly, commenting in an ironic way that that is not the first time they have done that. The young Do-yoon appears by surprise at the door and confronts the kidnappers, questioning the origin of that criminal group. Without hesitating, one of the criminals delivers a violent kick against the boy's stomach, who is thrown backward with force. The little one falls heavily on the floor, while the aggressor complains about the audacity of the children of that poor neighborhood. He cleans the dust from his clothes, grumbling that even the street urchins of that region lost their respect for the rules. Other accomplice grabs a heavy suitcase, suggesting that they hurry to guarantee the money soon. The criminals flee in a hurry, carrying the kidnapped victim, while the young Do-yoon watches everything fallen and without strength. Before crossing the exit door, one of the kidnappers stops and looks thoughtfully backward, demonstrating hesitation. He questions his partner about what they should do with the injured boy, who remained fallen on the floor of the hallway. The accomplice kicks Do-yoon again with violence, alleging that he does not intend to waste time hiding a body there. The man smiles in a sadistic and cold way, deciding to abandon the injured boy to his own fate on the floor of that building. Do-yoon faints on the dust of the cold floor, while the kidnappers' footsteps distance themselves slowly through the night. The harsh reality of that district was cruel because criminals from another region kidnapped local children to sell them. Back in the present, Do-yoon questions if that crime from the past would not be sufficient justification to take their region. Choi-dae-yeop widens his eyes in complete shock upon realizing that the young man knows everything about his gang's hidden crimes. The mobster tries to disguise his nervousness with a tense smile, commenting in a vague way that no one can prove anything. The young man displays an ironic and dark smile, demonstrating that he has no intention of letting that provocation pass. Dae-yeop loses his patience once and for all and warns that before that audacity he definitely will not be able to spare the young man's life. With his red eyes shining intensely, Do-yoon guarantees the mobster that he also has no plans to let him escape free. Dae-yeop's henchman advances, delivering a violent punch, but the young man dodges the attack with extreme ease and speed. The criminal tries to hit him again, but Do-yoon moves with agility, deviating from all the blows without any difficulty. With a countenance thirsty for blood, the young man counterattacks with fury, advancing against the adversary in an overwhelming way. He lands a devastating punch directly on the henchman's face, who feels the whole impact of the boy's enormous strength. The henchman screams in pain, spitting red, while his body is thrown backward with violence after the brutal blow. Without giving him a break, the young Do-yoon advances again with his fist clenched, focused on knocking out the enemy once and for all. He delivers a spectacular flying kick against the adversary's stomach, knocking out the henchman in an impressive way. Choi-dae-yeop watches that whole scene in a complete state of shock, frightened by the absurd strength of that teenager. The henchman falls completely unconscious on the floor, while Do-yoon watches him with coldness, before focusing his look on the leader. The young man looks at his watch on his wrist calmly, commenting in a cold way that the mobster talked too much before the fight. With an intimidating countenance and his eyes shining, he warns that their time for small talk finally came to an end. Yep walks slowly in the direction of the young man, admitting that now he understands the reason for so much insistence on a justification. The mafia leader displays an insane and bright look, revealing that the young man finally managed to wake his interest for the fight. He attacks, delivering a powerful punch that cuts the air, but Do-yoon manages to block the blow, holding the opponent's fist. The two exchange heavy blows in the middle of the street, starting a balanced and extremely violent confrontation between titans. Yoon deflects the rival's attack and says in a cold way for him to stop stalling and fight with all his strength at once. He holds the arm of the gang leader firmly, commenting ironically that he doubts a lot that they will meet again. The mafia leader despairs upon feeling his arm completely immobilized by the enormous force of the boy's grip. Do-yoon stares at him coldly with his red eyes and warns in an intimidating way that his time finally ran out. The young man grabs Yep's head with total force, promising that he will make the legendary criminal taste the flavor of defeat. The man widens his eyes in pure despair upon hearing the word defeat coming from the mouth of that very frightening boy. Do-yoon smiles in a sadistic way, knowing very well that the destiny of that rival gang was already completely sealed that night. He crushes Yap's head against the floor with brutality, declaring that the control of that region now belongs to him. Yep tries to free himself desperately from Do-yoon's grip, demanding that the young man let him go immediately. Suddenly, a violent blow interrupts the action with a clicking sound, and a voice echoes, saying that he had already warned before. Firm footsteps approach the location slowly while the newcomer warns that no one should touch his boy again. The powerful one emerges from the shadows with a red and frightening look, promising to pluck the eyes of whoever touches the young man. Taken by an overwhelming fury, the monster stares at the rival closely, repeating his terrible and relentless death threat. Moments before, over the phone, an ally warned one about a dinner celebrating the transfer, and he asks for the location. The henchman explains that the meeting will be near the warehouse next to the road, and the leader hangs up, confirming that he understood. One closes his cell phone with a harsh click, preparing himself immediately to go to the indicated location. The strong Dong scene approaches and asks if the young Do-yoon finally decided to appear to talk to them. The fighter prepares to accompany his leader on the way, but one stops him, deciding to resolve everything alone. The leader opens the meeting room's exit door and orders firmly that his trusted ally remain there. One walks in a hurry through the hallway, commenting with disdain that the situation boils down only to the neighboring district. Dong Scene bows deeply in a sign of respect, wishing that his leader returns in total safety from the mission. The mobster accelerates his step in the middle of the rainy night, running with determination to intervene in the boys' confrontation. Back in the present, one walks slowly in the rain, repeating to the rival that he had already been warned about the danger. Yap is completely terrified to hear the man repeat that he will pluck his eyes if he touches Do-yoon. The young Do-yoon watches the arrival of his protector in silence, intrigued by the mobster's protective attitude that night. The young man reflects on the fact of never having been able to understand the real reason why the gang leader cares so much about him. With a countenance taken by hatred, one yells furiously against the rival, declaring that he protects the young man because he is his son. The young Do-yoon displays a dark and concentrated look, focused entirely on the bombshell revelation made by the mobster. Yep points to the henchman knocked out on the floor, indignant that a boy caused so much damage in his territory. One positions himself in a cold way before the opponent, demanding in a calm way that he finally recovers his sanity. The rival rants, irritated, saying that there are no children in the world of crime and that his nonsense will not work. The leader of Granilpa clenches his teeth with force and retorts to the insult, telling the opponent to shut his mouth and prepare to fight. Day. Yep advances with speed, yelling that whoever talks like trash deserves to be treated with the same violence as always in the alley. The rival delivers a fast punch in the direction of Mu Wan's face, yelling swear words to try to destabilize him in the fight. The gang leader dodges with agility, while the opponent promises that this time he will not aim only at his eyes. Day Yap rants, saying that he intends to rip off the opponent's ear to make him pay dearly for such audacity. The rival advances with total fury, delivering a fast sequence of punches in the air to try to corner the experienced leader. The two monsters start a fast, an insane exchange of blows in the middle of the street, under the weak illumination of the neighborhood's poles. Day Yep makes an expression of extreme tension and physical effort upon realizing the speed and precision of the rival's attacks. Mu Wan moves with agility and counterattacks in a surgical way, opening a perfect gap in the opponent's defense. The leader lands a direct and crushing punch on the rival's jaw, making the red liquid splash through the air with the impact's force. The pain of the brutal blow makes the eyes of the rival gang leader widen in pure despair and agony in the middle of the combat. Without giving any chance of defense, Mu Wan continues to fire fast and precise punches against the opponent's debilitated body. Do-eun watches the intense and technical combat of his adoptive father in silence, with his red eyes shining in the darkness. Day Yep tries to react with a desperate punch, yelling that the rival was demoted from the faction because of his foolish attitudes. The rival's punch collides with force against Mu Wan's defense, generating a strong impact that shakes the confrontation location. The opponent displays an expression of pain and extreme fatigue upon realizing that his attacks do not have any effect on the leader. Mu Wan dodges in a spectacular way, lowering his body and preparing his next devastating punch against the opponent. He focuses all his strength in his clenched fist and delivers a deadly hook in the direction of the rival's unprotected chin. The brutal impact of the blow hits the rival fully, who spits a lot of red liquid while trying to remain standing on the dark street. Day Yap hesitates for an instant, staggering backward, but tries to deliver one last desperate punch to defend himself. The two warriors attack simultaneously, crossing their most powerful blows in the middle of that mortal battle. Mu Wan is faster and lands a violent punch directly on the adversary's face, who is pushed with force backward. Do-eun follows attentively every movement of that impressive dispute, analyzing the devastating strength of the combat. The opponent's face remains completely bloodied and disfigured before the relentless sequence of attacks by the leader. With a concentrated and serious look, the young Do-eun remains focused on the outcome of that decisive fight between the two leaders. Mu Wan takes advantage of the final gap and turns his body, delivering an overwhelming right hook to end the dispute once and for all. The devastating impact makes the rival drag his feet on the wet asphalt, fighting desperately not to fall unconscious. Day Yep tries to deliver a violent kick, but Mu Wan dodges the attack with extreme agility and ease. The rival retreats quite irritated and out of breath, cursing the opponent for not being able to land any blow on him. He rants, furious, questioning if the opponent really does not know the true reason for his punishment in the past. Mu Wan remains standing in the middle of the dark street, maintaining his intimidating posture with his bright eyes. The gang leader stares at the rival with disdain and asks in a provocative way if he finally got scared of fighting. Day Yep explodes with anger before the provocation and rushes at the opponent, cursing him with all the hatred he possesses. The opponent yells, furious, declaring that he waited a long 10 years for that decisive moment to take revenge on the leader. He runs in desperation in the direction of Mu Wan, determined to destroy the opponent once and for all in that alley. The rival leader invokes all his fury, remembering that the feared ear-cutting shark remains extremely dangerous. He focuses all his strength in his clenched fist, preparing a devastating attack against the criminal organization's leader. The two leaders collide their fists with extreme violence, generating an overwhelming impact that echoes throughout the neighborhood. Mu Wan demonstrates a countenance of pure fury, with his eyes shining intensely in the middle of that mortal combat. Do-eun watches the battle closely, surprised by the level of violence and the determination of the two experienced fighters. The devastating blow hits Day Yep fully, making his head tilt backward while the red liquid splashes from his face. The rival leader collapses, completely defeated and unconscious on the wet asphalt, while Mu Wan watches him from above. The gang leader remains standing, triumphant over the fallen opponent, demonstrating his absolute superiority in the fight. Mu bows and grabs the defeated rival by the hair, repeating calmly that he had already been warned before. With a dark and frightening look, the leader warns that this time he will not aim at the eyes, but will pluck his ear. The alley is taken by a deafening scream of pure agony and pain when the promised punishment is executed without mercy. The leader executes his terrible threat in a brutal way, plucking the opponent's ear in an act of extreme violence. Yoon watches the outcome of the combat and reflects that regardless of the situation, the final result is always the same. The young man smiles, knowing that in the end, one always comes out victorious against any enemy who tries to face him. Tae, who was known for plucking his enemy's ears, ended up tasting his own medicine that night. The young man realizes that his adoptive father is a relentless man who knows exactly what needs to be done to win. He notes that the man not only fulfills his promises, but also guarantees that enemies never forget the lesson. Yoon thinks that the result of that violent battle was already completely decided from the very first moment. The young man recognizes that relentless and violent attitude is the registered trademark of Kim Won's style of acting. The leader extends his hand to help the young man stand up, proving to be a leader worthy of being at the top of the organization. Upon looking at the extended hand, Yoon realizes that beside that strong man, his goals can become reality. One asks with disdain the reason for the boy still not having accepted his help to stand up from that dirty floor. The young man finally holds the leader's hand firmly, who asks the reason for him staring at his face that way. Yoon stands up and warns in a sincere way that the man has his mouth bleeding due to the blows received in the fight. The leader touches his chin, minimizing the injury, but the boy insists, concerned, that continues to be a wound. One decides that it is time for them to leave, but the young man asks him to wait an instant before they leave that alley. The leader walks away, waving, and tells the young man to find his own way back home on that rainy night. The young Yoon bows and collects something bloody from the alley's floor, determined to keep that proof of his victory. He observes the opponent's severed ear in his sweaty hand, knowing exactly the value that bizarre trophy possesses. Back in the present at the office, the young man explains to the leader that he went there to recover the money that belongs to him. One listens attentively, lying on the sofa, and questions if he did all that to create a justification for the fight. The gang leader scratches his head, laughing at how children nowadays manage to be extremely bold and audacious. He vents, thoughtful, saying that he cannot define if the young man is very intelligent or simply reckless. The man reflects seriously and concludes that keeping Yoon away from that violent world is the best decision to be made at the moment. Yoon asks the leader not to complicate things, stating with total conviction that he only fulfilled his word. The young man stares at him seriously, guaranteeing that he acted in a cold way only to keep the promise he had made to him. One agrees with his head, but reminds the young man that he heard that the dangerous Choi Yap is returning to the headquarters. The leader states that as they did not manage to fulfill the agreement, the young man should give up crime and return to studying. The man guarantees that in the Guncheong district, there will certainly be at least one school willing to accept his enrollment. Yoon stares at him with dissatisfaction and retorts in a firm way, questioning the reason for having to return to school. The young man puts his hand in his coat pocket, warning the gang leader that he finally brought what had been agreed upon. He extends his open hand, revealing the defeated rival's ear and delivering the bizarre trophy that had been requested. One smiles, saying that an ear is part of the head, that because of that he fulfilled his previous promise. Yoon raises his fist, stating that just as the ear belongs to the head, he belongs to Granilpa as Won's son. The leader lowers his head, letting out a sigh, disbelieving the limitless audacity of that daring young man. Won rubs his temple, completely perplexed, without being able to understand how the boy manages to be so stubborn. Sitting on the sofa, the leader questions seriously the reason for the young man insisting so much on following that path. He asks why the boy wants to be a gangster, and mainly the reason for wanting to be his son right away. The young Yoon remains firm before him and responds with total coldness that he possesses only two great goals: With a sharp look, he explains that the first of them is to destroy and drag those corrupt wretches into the mud. The young man wishes to throw all his enemies into a place that is much lower than his own position. He adds that in the search for this goal, it does not matter if this will be part of the whole process or the final result. His definitive goal is to place his adoptive father at the absolute top of the power of that entire criminal region. Yoon stares at him with his red eyes shining and guarantees that this is his next and unshackable life goal. Meanwhile, outside the office, the strong Dong-sin waits patiently, leaning against the hallway wall. The young man opens the door suddenly and lets out a sound of surprise upon encountering the experienced fighter standing right there. The fighter turns, looking at the boy in a serious way, and just orders him to accompany him without asking questions. The two walk in silence through the dark night, while the sound of their firm steps echoes through the quiet street. The young man, who follows the man right behind, asks if they are going again in the direction of that old slope by the river. The two arrive before a small neighborhood grocery store. Quite bright in the middle of that quiet dark night, the fighter opens a plastic package and extends a blue ice pop, offering the sweet directly to the young man. Dong-sin asks the reason for him doing all that, and if he really wishes to join the Ganelpa gang. The young man takes the sweet and responds that that was not sudden, as he felt that his destiny was already traced since forever. He bites the ice pop and vents that it does not matter how much he tries to fight against it. He would always end up on that same dark path. The experienced fighter listens to him with a concentrated look, demonstrating that he understands the gravity of the young man's words. He warns seriously, if there is no very strong reason, the young man should stay away from all that darkness. The man touches the boy's shoulder, commenting that he possesses an extraordinary natural talent for street fights. The young man is surprised while he listens to his mentor say that he ended up moving away from fights, but that the boy can win. Dong-sin bites his sweet and advises him not to think about nonsense and leave the big problems only to the adults. The boy clenches his teeth with anger and states with determination that he does not intend to leave things as they are today anymore. He guarantees with total conviction that if he himself does not act and take an attitude, nothing in that violent place will change. The fighter stares at him closely, reminding him that he never tried only to fight, that he could resolve everything based on strength. Yoon responds calmly with his head lowered, saying that he has total consciousness of that and understands the mentor's concern. The young man points out that Dong-sin and leader One's plan against the other factions also boils down to pure revenge. He bites another piece of the ice pop with fury, declaring that for this reason, he also needs to participate in the confrontation. The tattooed fighter remains with his back turned, thoughtful before that impressive demonstration of firmness by the young student. The young man points his thumb to himself with hatred, reaffirming that his great and only goal from now on is revenge. The fighter reveals that a very important order coming directly from the high-ranking leaders was also just issued. He reports to the leader that the boy stated with all letters that One was officially his true father. Back at the office, the leader listens to everything in silence, crumbling a paper with his hands while reflecting on the report. He throws the crumpled paper directly into the trash can, demonstrating that he is quite thoughtful about the revelations made. Suddenly, the office door is opened by someone who enters asking if fighter Dong-san is at that location. The alley bows in a respectful way while the leader asks if the young Yoon has already left there in safety. Dong-sin confirms with his head and guarantees that the young man managed to return to his residence without any problem. One sighs and comments in a reflective way about how that boy's decisions ended up taking that drastic turn. The fighter approaches with respect and questions in a direct way the reason for his leader having taken that extreme attitude. The mafia leader turns his look away and responds thoughtfully that even if the boy could not officially be his son, the ally alerts him, surprised, reminding that the boy just declared that he intends to attack the rival faction directly. Dong-sin points his index finger in the direction of the room's corner to show physical proof of what was discussed. The image reveals the severed ear ear of the opponent thrown in a frightening way directly on the smooth office floor. The man in the blue shirt explains that the young man used that terrible promise of bringing the rival's head to threaten him. One listens to the final explanation and concludes seriously that he now understands perfectly how that whole bizarre situation occurred. Dong-sin agrees with his head and states seriously to his leader that he understood perfectly the whole situation. The fighter thinks in a concentrated way about the fact that the young man now also officially becomes the leader's adopted son. One clenches his teeth with force, demonstrating that he is quite worried and tense about the organization's next steps. Dong-sun questions the leader in a direct way about how the big plan that they had already structured previously will remain. The leader hits the table with his clenched fist and guarantees with total firmness that absolutely nothing will change in the group's goals. He explains that as Koi Day, has already been neutralized, they need to move even faster to dominate the region once and for all. Meanwhile, the young Do-yoon walks alone back home, climbing the stairs of the dark neighborhood and letting out a long sigh. He reflects thoughtfully on One's attitudes and admits to himself that his adoptive father is an extremely incredible man. The young man remembers the moment when he promised that his biggest life goal would be to place his father at the absolute top of power. The young Do-yoon displays a concentrated look, remembering that he will do everything necessary to fulfill that decisive goal. Back in his thoughts, the boss asks the boy if he really thinks it is possible to solve big problems without any effort. With a slight smile on his face, the young man calmly replies that he obviously knows it is a completely impossible task. He points to the mobster and declares with total conviction that from that exact moment on, he considers him his true father. Do-yoon stares at him with bright, serious eyes and asks if there is any mistake in thinking that way so directly. One sighs deeply, annoyed by the stubbornness, and warns that such an important decision cannot be made so easily. The boss explains maturely that raising a child requires total dedication, and that it will never seem like enough, no matter how hard one tries. He looks at the thoughtful boy and comments that his biological parents probably felt exactly the same way in the past. The man asks him seriously if he will continue to agree to this difficult life, even knowing all the consequences. Do-yoon retorts firmly, saying that for this exact reason, he is determined to take the name Kim Do-yoon starting today. The young man guarantees with fury in his eyes that the Gunilpa office is now the only place he truly considers his home. One is speechless for a moment at the boy's impressive display of loyalty and courage. The gang leader finally yields and accepts the proposal, saying calmly that that conversation had already been more than enough. The two remain standing face to face in the middle of the room, silently sealing that new and important family pact. With a discreet smile, the boss places his hand on the young man's head and officially accepts the boy as his new adopted son. Do-yoon reflects that even if the man had coldly rejected him, he would have had no fair justification to complain. Arriving at the entrance of his house, the young man stops thoughtfully, unsure of how he will reveal all that big news to his sister. Suddenly, the young girl opens the iron gate in anger, shouting that she heard his whole conversation about becoming an adopted son. The boy is quite startled to realize that his younger sister ended up finding out everything before he could even explain. She crosses her arms irritably and tells her brother that she already knows about his request to live in the dreaded Gunilpa office. Do-yoon swallows hard, completely embarrassed, and asks if she really managed to hear every detail of their previous conversation. The girl remains serious, staring at her older brother with a deep look before finally giving her honest opinion. She asks directly if, in the end, that risky negotiation went exactly the way he wanted. The young man scratches the back of his neck, quite awkwardly, nodding timidly to confirm that the result was exactly what he expected. The sister turns her back and comments that it is great when something we try to do for the first time works out right from the start. With a calmer expression, she walks toward the inside of the house and sternly orders him to come in and eat something. She says affectionately that she is absolutely sure that her brother has not had a decent meal since he left. Surprised by his sister's positive and welcoming reaction, the young man thanks her timidly as he follows her into the residence. Calmness takes over the humble family home under the starry sky, bringing a rare moment of peace before the storm begins. The next day, all 6 important members of the gang gather in the office meeting room to outline their plans. One of the older henchmen comments harshly that the presence of that boy, De-yoon, makes the atmosphere quite uncomfortable. The boss intervenes calmly, adjusting himself on the sofa, and warns that everyone there will need to get used to the young man's presence. One looks at the young man seriously and asks if he really managed to clear the neighborhood as he had promised. The young man confirms, saying that he spoke with his sister, and since she already knew the whole truth, there was no need for secrets. The leader leans back on the sofa and asks the young man to share his thoughts that motivated him to ask to join the gang. Yoon explains with total seriousness that the fastest method with the highest chance of absolute success to destroy their rivals is. The young man begins to detail his entire secret strategic plan, making the henchmen in the room listen in complete silence. One lets out a tired sigh after hearing the young man's explanation and admits that he was quite curious about his plan. With a serious and authoritative expression, the leader of the criminal organization refuses the young man's request directly and definitively. He explains that in large-scale plans, the most important factor of all must always be the safety of each one of them. The leader guarantees that if all 6 members there are not alive at the end of the mission, he will never authorize such a strategy. One warns that there is no need for haste and that they should follow the original plan, clearing the region little by little. The ally in the light-colored shirt agrees with his head bowed, respecting the rational decision made by his experienced leader. Suddenly, the entrance door to the base is opened with extreme violence by intruders, creating a huge crash in the room. A group of unknown men invades the place by surprise, leaving all the gang members in a complete state of alert. The tough guys enter confidently, confirming to each other that this place is indeed the headquarters of the Gunilpa gang. One of the allies quickly locks the iron door from the inside, preventing any of the intruders from trying to escape. The invaders display arrogant expressions, believing they have a total advantage over the small group in the office. Without giving time for talk, one of the Gunilpa allies advances at high speed, delivering the first surprise blow. The combatant jumps through the air with total fury, demonstrating impressive agility to initiate the physical counterattack. He roars furiously at the intruders, calling the rivals troublemakers as he advances, determined to crush them once and for all. The enemy henchmen widen their eyes in complete despair as they realize the overwhelming speed of the base's defender. The combatant lands a crushing punch directly on the first opponent's jaw, making his nose bleed in the air. The brutal impact is so strong that it throws the tough guy against the room wall, leaving the others in the place frightened. The Gunilpa warrior focuses his gaze on another target and delivers one more powerful punch that cuts through the air with great speed. He hits another invader squarely in the stomach, who doubles over in pain without being able to make any defensive reaction. The combatant spins his body, delivering a devastating right-handed punch that knocks the opponent out instantly on the ground. The invaders try to use iron rods, but the defender dodges all attacks with extraordinary agility. He counterattacks by delivering a brutal left-handed punch directly to the face of the rival, who falls completely unconscious. The fighter executes a precise and fast sweep to destabilize the remaining opponents, who try to surround him in the middle of the room. He delivers a spectacular spinning kick that collides with force against another enemy's head, ending the fight. The last invader collapses on the room floor under the attentive and serious gaze of the young Do-yoon, who analyzes all the movement. The Gunilpa warrior advances with fury to continue the rout, preparing one more brutal attack against the defeated leader. The leader of the invading gang shows an expression of pure dread as he realizes that he will be the next one to suffer the consequences of the fight. The combatant delivers a relentless right-handed punch right to the leader's face, who cries out in pain as he spits out a lot of blood. The invader falls backward onto the pavement, completely broken and powerless after receiving the overwhelming sequence of blows. One watches all that quick victory while lying on the sofa with a totally calm expression, without showing any surprise. The other allies watch the enemies moaning in pain on the ground. Surprised by the very fast outcome of that violent confrontation, the leader of the invaders raises a trembling hand, begging desperately for them to stop the aggression immediately. Mu-1 finally orders his trusted ally to stop the attack. Deciding to listen to what the rival has to say, the warrior holds the injured enemy by the collar of his shirt, but stops the punch upon hearing the firm command of his leader. He accepts Mu-1's order immediately, lowering his fists and staring at the defeated rival with an intimidating look. The mafia boss approaches and comments with disdain that those men are nothing but trash without any strength to fight. The ally in the light-colored shirt asks, irritably, for the real reason they invaded the Gnilpa headquarters. In such a way, the bruised invader explains desperately that they personally witnessed the humiliating defeat of the terrible Choi Dae. Yep, he reveals that they saw with their own eyes the rival faction leader being completely beaten and destroyed that night. The ally asks ironically if they invaded the place just to attempt a foolish revenge against their organization. The man denies it desperately, gesturing with his hands, and guarantees that is definitely not the group's intention. The rival leader bows deeply before Mu-1 and begs on his knees for the Gnilpa to accept them into their gang. He explains that they are just a small group without support, and for that reason, they decided to declare unconditional surrender once and for all. The ally in the light-colored shirt is quite surprised by that sudden proposal of unconditional surrender made by the rival. The young Do-yoon explains seriously that the group's first strategic step was to obtain total control of the region. He details that the neighboring area would be dominated anyway, and for that reason, the best option was to attack Choi Dae. First, the ally wonders if the powerful Daejeong would really give up that valuable territory without starting a big confrontation. He states with total certainty that a criminal organization of that size would never accept giving up land so easily. The young Do-yoon stares at him closely with his bright eyes, questioning what the real utility of that land would be for them. He displays the map of the region and explains that those abandoned districts have absolutely no economic value of any kind. The boy details that the rival faction only kept Choi Dae, yet there to watch the steps of other smaller organizations in the neighborhood. He concludes that after the rival leader's withdrawal, no other large gang will have reasons to continue disputing the region. The young man states with conviction that in the face of this new reality, only one single and obvious choice will remain for the smaller groups there. He guarantees that all the local small-time delinquents will be forced to bow before the Gnilpa, or they will be destroyed. Do-yoon explains calmly that he defeated the rival leader precisely to give his subordinates a reason to surrender. The boy points out that in the dead of night, the henchmen of the opposing gang watched everything from up on that dark walkway. Those who witnessed the humiliating defeat of their own boss up close were left with no other alternative for escape. With total confidence, Do-yoon guarantees the group that the Gnilpa will dominate that entire region anyway from then on. He states that the planned goal was to absorb the neighboring territories cleanly and without causing unnecessary loss of life. The young man concludes that if everything goes according to plan, the first big phase of their plan will already be successfully completed. Song Jae listens to the details of the plan in silence, completely shocked by the intelligence and boldness of that young boy. At that exact movement, Do-yoon gives a slight smile, commenting that the arrival of the invaders occurred at a simply perfect time. The young man focuses his gaze on his adopted father, waiting patiently to see what his reaction will be to that entire scene. Mu-1 analyzes that situation deeply, realizing that the boy's plan really worked out in a surprising way. The fallen enemies bow before Mu-1, begging for their lives and promising to do absolutely everything he orders. The gang boss scratches his head, quite perplexed, and lets out an unbelieving sigh at the turn things took there. The ally in the light-colored shirt looks at his boss and asks directly what they should do with those surrendered men. The boss stares at him seriously and replies that since they came all the way there to beg for forgiveness, the group has no other course of action. The leader accepts the defeated band into his gang, but warns in an intimidating way that they will need to follow some rules. He demands that the new henchman remain only in the neighboring district and warns that he will not accept bad plans or reports. The men bow deeply, thanking him for the opportunity and promising to strive to the maximum in the new faction. One points to the leader of the band, warning that he will command the remnants of the group and that the reports must go to Song J. The henchman accepts the order, shouting in relief and guaranteeing that he will do absolutely everything not to disappoint the new boss. The Granilpa leader lets out a long sigh of fatigue and simply gestures with his hand, sending them all away from there. The new subordinates bow one last time in a sign of respect and prepare to leave the group's office. The entrance door to the office is closed firmly right after the hurried departure of that whole group of surrendered men. Silence takes over the meeting room while all the gang members stare at each other, assimilating the new orders. One looks at the ally in the green coat and asks him to closely watch the actions of that new band that just entered. The warrior responds that he will personally take care of monitoring the steps of each one of those henchmen to avoid problems. Do-yoon turns with a triumphant look, thinking to himself that things are happening exactly as he planned. The boy stares at the other members of the organization and warns seriously that he will not accept any more complaints from then on. One clicks his tongue, quite bothered by the boy's arrogance, but decides not to prolong that discussion in the room. The ally in the light-colored shirt observes the young man with a focused expression, thinking about the future of that alliance. With a complicit smile, the fighter Dong Scene gives a thumbs-up sign, approving the boy's courageous attitude. The ally in the green coat also observes the young man seriously, recognizing the efficiency of the strategy that was used. Do-yoon stares back at them with his red eyes shining and suggests confidently that they just accept the facts. The boy walks toward the office exit, warning that he has already understood the silent message and that he will withdraw right now. He opens the door to the meeting room, claiming calmly that he still has some important things to prepare. The office door is closed with a dry click while the young Do-yoon begins his way back through the night. The leader of the defeated enemies walks with long strides along the long corridor of the luxurious building of the powerful rival organization. The man lets out a tired and tense sigh, trying to calm down as he approaches the executive office of that faction. Taken by the fury of having been defeated and humiliated, the monster curses loudly along the dark corridors of that commercial building. The man displays an expression taken by hatred and the desire for revenge, focused entirely on regaining his old territory. He knocks on the wooden office door, announcing his return and requesting permission to speak with the director. The mobster opens the door and enters the room, bowing deeply in a sign of absolute respect before the powerful executive. He explains to the director that he has returned to the headquarters and that he has an extremely important report to present immediately. The rival faction leader questions him harshly about what the nature of such an urgent communication would be. The subordinate responds with a tense and worried expression, revealing that the main subject involves the entire neighboring district. With clenched fists, the man reveals to his superior that Kim Moo-won's gang has finally initiated its movements. Meanwhile, in a previous scene, Do-yoon walks back to the group's office exit after exposing his plans. The boy opens the exit door, repeating that he needs to withdraw to start the preparations for his next missions. Outside, the young man lets out a long sigh of relief upon realizing that he managed to convince everyone with his strategy. The boy displays a focused and serious look, thinking to himself that the previous negotiation was a very close call. Do-yoon goes down the iron stairs of the commercial building in silence, determined to follow firmly with his plans for revenge. When the group of surrendered men was already going down the stairs to leave, the young Do-yoon shouts, ordering them all to stop. The henchmen turn around, irritated and scared, without understanding the reason for being stopped again in that alley. With his back turned, the boy responds coldly and mysteriously that he detained them simply because he had not yet delivered his message. The henchmen begin to complain furiously at the boy's audacity for speaking to them in such a disrespectful way. Do-yoon turns with an ironic and mocking smile on his face, saying that he already expected that silly reaction coming from that band. One of the tough guys approaches, shouting insults and asking if the boy really does not fear the age difference between them. The young man makes a dark and challenging expression, limiting himself only to telling his opponent to come and try something against him right there. With his red eyes shining intensely, Do-yoon asks in an intimidating way if the rival has his guard up. The mobster loses his patience completely and advances, delivering a violent punch against the boy to try to teach him to have respect. The young man dodges the attack with extreme agility, proving once again to be much faster than his opponents. Do-yoon counterattacks by delivering an overwhelming punch that hits the aggressor's face squarely, making the blood splatter through the air. The man collapses, defeated, onto the pavement, leaving the other companions in complete shock at such strength from the boy. The boy stares at them with disdain, asking ironically if their gang is so incompetent that it does not even remember his face. He raises his clenched fists in a combat position, challenging them directly to try to recognize who he really is. One of the henchmen retreats, quite sweaty and trembling, feeling that that teenager does indeed seem very familiar to the band. Suddenly, he widens his eyes in complete shock upon associating the boy with the past confrontations of the neighboring district. The mobster remembers the young man who interfered with the rival gang's plans, decisive moments in the recent past of the region. With a wicked smile on his face, Do-yoon comments sarcastically that, apparently, they finally remembered him. The man enters into despair upon realizing that the boy was the one largely responsible for making the old leader act in the past. He clenches his fist with hatred upon realizing that that cursed teenager discovered secrets that should never be revealed. Taken by fury, the henchman runs desperately toward Do-yoon, determined to end the boy's life at any cost. He shouts furiously, declaring that he cannot allow the young man to remain alive to ruin the organization's plans. Do-yoon dodges with mastery one more punch delivered by the opponent, preparing himself to apply a fatal counterattack. The young man delivers a precise and devastating punch that hits the rival squarely in the jaw, interrupting his advance. The mobster makes an expression of extreme agony and pain upon feeling the full impact of the brutal blow delivered by the boy. Without giving any respite, Do-yoon spins his body and applies a spectacular kick that throws the opponent with a lot of force against the ground. The opponent falls completely defeated while the young man warns coldly that the only person who will not leave there alive is him. The boy raises his foot with brutality, preparing himself to apply a merciless final blow against the enemy fallen on the pavement. He stomps with extreme force against the rival's chest, making it clear who really rules in that neighborhood now. The other henchmen watch that entire violent scene in a complete state of panic and without the courage to show any reaction. Do-yoon points out that that man was the only one who continued acting arrogantly, even after the fall of the old leader. The young man walks slowly toward the remaining ones, warning coldly that he does not care about the face of any of them there. The leader of the group tries to justify himself, alleging that the companion acted behind their backs and that the past has no relation to them. The boy retorts, saying that that does not change the fact that they are criminals, and asks if they are trying to defy the boss's orders. Do-yoon warns seriously that he went there only to ensure that they do not take the Gunilpa's orders lightly. With a scary look, he guarantees that from now on he will not accept any type of rebellious behavior in the organization. Quite scared, the leader of the band guarantees that he understood the message and that he himself will take charge of resolving the situation. The young man comments that at least it is good to know that there is someone rational in the group, but makes it clear that he does not trust criminals. He displays an ironic smile and warns provocatively that it is better they remain attentive and smart until the end of it all. Do-yoon turns his back and leaves calmly, while the henchmen carry the injured companion back to the base. The leader of the group thinks, worried, that the Gunilpa does indeed possess an extremely dangerous and merciless member in its ranks. The other henchman suggests hurriedly that they get rid of that injured body quickly before other people see the scene. The leader concludes that the best option for the band is to cut off definitely any old relationship with the former rival boss. He reflects, scared, that that mysterious boy seems to know all the hidden crimes and can be the mastermind of all of that. The man ponders, worried, that Do-Yoon may be planning something infinitely bigger and more dangerous for the entire region. Do-Yoon recalls that those responsible for the terrible human trafficking in the past were precisely those local criminals. The boy thinks that if he uses the correct information, he will be able to clear that entire neighborhood much faster than expected. He focuses his thoughts on the next neighboring district, knowing that he needs to obtain absolute control of everything quickly. The young man observes his own shadow projected on the wall and thinks that his adopted father certainly agrees with his actions. Suddenly, a suspicious noise coming from behind the stairs calls the attention of the boy, who turns immediately in alert. Suddenly, some crumpled school documents are thrown with disdain directly onto the house entrance floor. The rich boy Sung Hyuk appears, laughing mockingly, and comments that it was quite difficult to find that humble house. Do-Yoon stares at him with total seriousness and coldness, keeping himself on maximum alert in the face of that so unexpected visit. Sung Hyuk displays a cynical and wit smile, demonstrating all the arrogance typical of someone who has the powerful Daedeong behind him. The spoiled boy asks ironically if the young man was really the one largely responsible for defeating Choi Dae. Yip, he gets very close to the young man's face, trying to intimidate him in every possible way with his presence there. Sung Hyuk shouts irritably, saying that his days of peace also ended because of that mess from the past. Do-Yoon continues in silence, keeping his sharp gaze, while the rival complains about the way he is looked at by the young man. The rich boy promises that he will do everything to mess up the boy's life and warns him to be very careful from then on. He demands that the young man walk with his eyes down and threatens him, saying that he will make it a point to end his life on the street. Without patience, Do-Yoon passes by directly, bumping his shoulder with force against the rival, who curses loudly at the firm attitude. The young man clenches his teeth with force, containing his anger so as not to initiate one more violent confrontation right there at the entrance. The boy's school papers remain thrown in the dirt of the floor as a reminder of that sudden humiliation. Do-Yoon observes the fallen documents and begins to wonder, worried, if his younger sister also saw that scene. He places his hand over his chest, trying to calm his accelerated heartbeat after all that tension with the rival. The young man opens the residence's iron gate slowly, determined to enter and resolve that family situation soon. He walks through the dark backyard of his humble house, thoughtful about the real dangers that now surround his family. Back at the office, the alley questions his boss seriously, asking if things are not going too far. The man places the glass jar containing the opponent's severed ear onto the makeshift meeting room table. Moo-won explains that the defeated rival was extremely experienced and that the enemy faction acted with caution because of him. The boss pours a drink and ponders that would Do-Yoon exposed. The only way to protect him was to attract all the fury to himself. He concludes that since the boy's aggressor was the son of a rival director, the responsible ones must assume the blame once and for all. Moo-won assumes a serious expression and states with his head bowed that both he and the defeated rival must pay for the mistake. The ally holds the cardboard box and confirms if the jar with the ear should really be sent in the name of the gang leader. With an intimidating look, the boss confirms, saying that it is necessary to have at least a warning of this level to make the enemy react. Meanwhile, the night falls silently over the two siblings' humble residence in the quiet neighborhood of the district. Inside the house, the sister questions him harshly, asking if he really wishes to fight against dangerous mobsters. Do-Yoon only agrees with his head, keeping his firm and unshakable decision to continue with the group's revenge plan. The young girl despairs at her brother's response and asks out loud if he went completely crazy to make that decision. She reminds the boy about how cruel these large criminal factions are and how capable they are of destroying people's lives. Clenching her hands stems from nervousness. She questions if he already forgot that their old families were ruined by them. The young girl states that it makes no sense to try to face such powerful criminals by acting in a totally solitary way. Do-yoon retorts with total seriousness, revealing that their residence's address has already been completely exposed to the rivals. The girl is in a complete state of shock upon realizing the gravity of the situation and the imminent danger they now run there. The boy explains that he needs to discover for himself if he is strong enough to protect whom he loves and resolve things. Do-yoon stares at her with determination and confesses sincerely that he wishes to test the limits of his own combat strength. The two siblings continue sitting at the table in complete silence in the face of that so difficult revelation about their future. The girl bows her head with sadness, but reinforces that even in the face of that scenario, her brother should not carry out everything alone. She suggests that he convince the other gang members to go together or that he finds someone of total trust to help. The young man remains in silence for a moment, analyzing seriously the advice and the sincere concern of his sister. He gets up from his chair and states decisively that this is a task that would need to be done 1 hour or another. The boy looks at her and warns calmly that he will consider that conversation as an official permission to move forward. The young girl lets out a sound of surprise at her older brother's unshakable determination in the face of that risk situation. Do-yoon suggests seriously that from now on she also starts to live in his new adopted father's house for greater protection. The girl observes him in silence, thoughtful about the idea having to leave her old home to live with the mafia boss. Later, she sits alone on her dark room floor, reflecting deeply on the words spoken by her brother. The young girl crumples a paper with her hands nervously while silence and melancholy take over the entire environment. She lowers her head, thoughtful, repeating the word "lo" while trying to accept the new reality of her family. Some tears begin to fall silently onto the room floor, reflecting all the girl's pain and uncertainty. The girl cries in silence in the corner of her empty room without knowing what destiny holds for her and her brother from now on. In the dead of night, the silhouette of an unknown man emerges, walking silently through the dark neighborhood of the district. The mysterious man displays a frightening and bright gaze while focusing his attention directly on the two siblings' home. Unaware of the danger on the outside, the girl continues sitting alone on the floor of her room in complete silence and sadness. The intruder walks slowly along the slope, observing the residents from above and commenting in a low and mysterious way. He says with malice that that place seems to be the perfect target to be crushed without any difficulty of defense. Meanwhile, in the office, several important reports about the region are spread out on the meeting table. Moo-1 taps his fingers rhythmically against the papers, demonstrating to be deeply focused on the next steps. The entire team accompanies the tense silence of the boss, who continues tapping on the table while analyzing the neighborhood information. One of the gang members comments seriously that Do-yoon definitely does not possess a very obedient personality. Song J adds word that no one expected that the young boy would be able to recruit the rival band with such ease. The mafia boss remains silent for a few moments, just absorbing the opinions of his trusted allies about the boy. With a focused look, Moon breaks the silence and warns decisively that they need to accelerate the group's original plan. The henchmen at the meeting table stare at him with surprise upon realizing the sudden change in their experienced leader's posture. The boss explains firmly that postponing the confrontation became a much more dangerous option for the safety of everyone there. He hits the table, declaring that he sent a warning to the rival and that they need to clear the next district quickly. Silence returns to the room while the Gunulpa members assimilate the new challenges they will face in the next few hours. Song J questions the leader if there is any chance of the plan suffering problems or unexpected complications on the way. Moo-1 responds with philosophy that when a rock begins to roll, stopping the movement will only cause a much worse impact. The allies listen to him with attention, understanding the relentless logic that the boss always uses to guide the organization, clenching his fist with force. The leader states with determination that this time acting with speed is the safest way to win. In a dark room, a mysterious cardboard box containing a glass jar shines under the weak lighting of the environment. The glass jar reveals the severed ear of the rival, serving as the terrible and provocative warning sent by Kim Moo-won. A hand trembles with pure hatred upon crushing the cardboard box with total violence upon realizing the meaning of that bizarre trophy. Choi-dae Yep trembles with fury, holding the package with his eyes widened in pure despair in the face of that humiliation. The monster displays a red gaze taken by absolute hatred, while his entire body trembles with the uncontrollable desire for revenge. Gnashing his teeth with anger, the man curses furiously at Moo-won, calling his old rival a totally crazy troublemaker. Yep crushes the wrapping with his own hands, complaining that the opponent used a very obvious and direct move against him. Taken by fury, he destroys the glass jar with the force of his fists, making the shards scatter with a sharp noise. The man throws the remains of the box against the wall, discharging all his accumulated anger with that provocative warning. The golden lid of the broken jar collides against the cold floor of the room, echoing a metallic sound in the middle of that silent environment. Firm steps of dress shoes approach, stepping mercilessly over the glass shards scattered across the office floor. The door to the luxurious executive office is opened with force, calling the attention of everyone present. In that tense environment, the young Sung Hyok remains standing before his father with an extremely dejected and visibly frightened expression. The director, Hwang Sung-ju, hits the table furiously, demanding explanations from his son for having failed in such a shameful way. The boy lowers his head in a humiliating way, enduring the shouting and the fury of his father without being able to make any reaction. Knocking on the door interrupts the violent scolding when Choi-dae Yep announces his arrival from outside the office. The door opens and the dangerous warrior enters decisively into the room under the scared and tense gaze of the young Sung Hyuk. The rich boy lets out a sigh of relief upon realizing that the focus of his father's anger will finally shift away from him for a moment. The director stares at the newcomer with extreme fury, questioning harshly who allowed his entry into that room. Yep bows deeply in a sign of respect and asks for sincere apologies to his superior for the inconvenience generated. The man adjusts himself in the chair, letting out a sigh of fatigue, and asks impatiently what the mobster wishes to report. The warrior formally requests permission to act alone and independently for just a few days in the neighborhood. The two men remain in silence before the powerful director's desk, awaiting the final decision of the faction executive. The director stares at him suspiciously and asks if this sudden request for independent action occurs. But Kim Moo-won, Sung Hyuk is extremely surprised and scared to hear the rival boss's name being mentioned so directly by his father. Yep confirms with seriousness, revealing that he received a direct and provocative invitation from his old combat adversary. The director narrows his eyes, analyzing deeply the real intentions and the real dangers behind that big dispute. He taps his fingers on the table, thoughtful, and concludes coldly that all that sudden movement is extremely suspicious. The powerful leader guarantees firmly that he himself will take care of resolving that delicate situation once and for all. The man orders with disdain for the ally not to fall into foolish provocations and to focus only on his own scheduled tasks. The warrior Choi-dae Yep bows respectfully and withdraws from the room. After accepting the order not to act impulsively, he clenches his teeth with total force, accumulating all his fury and the desire for revenge against the adverse leader. The mobster closes the door of the luxurious office slowly, but with his expression totally taken by hatred. He reflects, irritated, that the director always knows how to take advantage of the situation and warns that the boss should not interfere. Yep's gaze shines with malice, proving that he definitely does not intend to let that provocation pass by. He walks along the building corridor, deciding that that moment is indeed still not the ideal one to initiate his counterattack. The man pulls out his cellular phone and makes a secret call, alleging harshly that he will act on his own on the street. Meanwhile, the darkness of the night covers the humble dwellings of the quiet district where the true threat hides. Suddenly, Do-yoon's cellular phone is thrown with total force against the stone stairs of a dark alley, The broken device falls to the ground near the light pole, symbolizing that the young man is now totally unreachable. Yoon continues walking alone through the dead of night, focused on finding the secret lair of the neighborhood traffickers. The boy checks the crumpled piece of paper in his hand, confirming that the sought address must be right in that region. He follows the path in search of a simple residence with a blue gate that serves as a base for the rival operations. Yoon finally locates the blue gate and stops before it, analyzing coldly the entrance of that suspicious place. He comments to himself that the criminals really chose an excellent hideout in the middle of that ordinary neighborhood. The young man spies through the crack in the gate silently to verify the movement in the backyard before acting. He enters the residence's backyard calmly, keeping himself always alert so as not to be caught by surprise by henchmen. The boy observes the stillness of the house, knowing very well that real danger awaits him. Right behind that entrance door, he hears the voice of one of the criminals talking happily on the phone inside the house and decides to attack. The henchman warns on the call that the goods have already been moved and that he is the only one left to finish the tasks there. The criminal explains calmly on the cellular phone that he will resolve everything as soon as his partner Sik arrives at the location. Suddenly, Yoon breaks into the window with a spectacular kick, making the glass shatter all over the house kitchen. The young man enters through the destroyed window and mocks the criminal, saying that he lives in a very miserable place for someone who sells people. The henchman is quite startled by the sudden invasion and lets the cellular phone fall to the ground in a complete state of shock. He ends the call hurriedly and stares at Yoon closely with an extremely irritated and bloodthirsty expression. The criminal gets up and warns mockingly that the boy should have arrived earlier, for he hates having to wait. The man walks slowly toward Yoon, displaying a sadistic smile and saying that it is great to see the young man personally there. The man asks ironically if the young man really remembers having already met in past confrontations. The boy responds that the information received was correct and that the Gnilpa indeed proved to be quite useful to him. The young Yoon comments with seriousness that the revelation that the enemy awaited him opens space for new investigations. The boy stares at him fixedly with his red eyes and asks if he received that information from Sik, the infiltrated traitor. Furious, the criminal advances, delivering a violent punch against the young man, shouting that the boy should not underestimate him. Yoon dodges the attack with agility and realizes that his suspicions about the infiltrated traitor were indeed true. The two initiate a balanced combat inside the kitchen, with the young man dodging a fast sequence of punches in the air. The henchman delivers a powerful punch that grazes the young man's defense, celebrating for finally managing to corner him. The man displays a wicked smile, believing that his overwhelming physical strength will be enough to crush the boy once and for all. He continues to discharge a relentless sequence of heavy blows against the boy, who fights to keep his defense firm. Yoon moves quickly, looking for an ideal opening to manage to counterattack the opponent in the middle of that mess. The young man delivers a precise right-handed punch against the adversary's face, who is pushed with force backward by the impact. The henchman makes a sound of pain upon feeling the crushing strength of the young man's blow and tries to support himself on the counter so as not to fall. Without giving time for reaction, Yoon advances and hits a sequence of brutal punches directly against the enemy's stomach. The adversary staggers backward, holding his belly in pain, and curses loudly with the fury of being dominated by the young man. The boy applies a fast and precise sweep, destabilizing the opponent completely, who loses his balance in the kitchen. The man falls heavily against the kitchen counter, knocking over liquor bottles and complaining about the turn that combat took. Desperate, the criminal grabs a heavy glass bottle with his hand, determined to use it as a lethal weapon in the fight. He strikes the air with the bottle, cursing furiously at Yoon for uncovering the crimes that occurred in the past. The bottle hits the wall, shattering all over the room, while the boy protects his face from the shards. The henchman takes advantage of the distraction and performs a brutal tackle against the young man, throwing Yoon's body against the floor. The man mounts onto the boy, delivering brutal punches and shouting that he only learned to fight a little and already thinks he is strong. The criminal delivers one last devastating blow directly to Yoon's face, shouting insults at the boy. The henchman continues to deliver blows against Do Yoon, mocking the fact that children were used as merchandise. On the floor, the young man feels deep disgust upon hearing the cruel report of that man who makes a living selling people. Taken by fury, Do Yoon promises that he will do the same with the rival and guarantees that he will destroy him without any mercy that day. The boy reacts violently, delivering an extremely powerful punch that hits the adversary's face squarely. The criminal screams in despair from pain upon having his arm completely immobilized by the overwhelming strength of the young man. Without giving any chance of defense, Do Yoon grabs the opponent's shirt collar firmly to initiate his sweep. He projects the adversary's body to the side, applying an overwhelming fall that throws the rival straight against the ground. The henchman collides heavily against the kitchen floor, making a thunderous noise and losing his strength for reaction. The young man mounts onto the fallen opponent and prepares his clenched fist to finish that combat with extreme brutality. He delivers a devastating punch directly to the rival's face, who screams in pain while the blood spatters the place. Do Yoon continues to strike the fallen opponent mercilessly, leaving his face completely disfigured and bloodied. The criminal moans in pain, totally defeated and without strength on the room floor after receiving that relentless sequence. The young man questions him coldly, asking if he committed so many crimes in life that he cannot even remember his face. He demands that the opponent stare at him closely, asking in an intimidating way if he finally manages to recognize him there. The bruised henchman observes him, trembling, admitting with dread that the boy's features do indeed seem quite familiar. Suddenly, he widens his eyes in complete shock upon associating the boy with the past confrontations of the neighboring district. The man remembers the young man who used to interfere with the gang's criminal actions at important moments in the past. The defeated rival spits blood and mocks, asking if the boy really believes that he will manage to save the faction's victims. Do Yoon ignores the provocation and picks up from the floor a pointed piece of broken glass bottle to use as a weapon. Holding the broken glass, the young man walks slowly toward the fallen opponent with an extremely dark look. He attacks the rival brutally, making the man scream in despair from pain, while the blood gushes on the room floor. With a cold expression, Do Yoon asks if this level of violent determination is enough to make him speak the truth. He demands that the opponent answer his questions immediately while keeping him completely immobilized under his weight. The young man stomps with total force on the adversary's wound, demanding that he reveal the whereabouts of the other victims. Do Yoon stares at him with his red eyes shining and orders harshly that he answer once and for all. Completely terrified, the man finally yields and reveals that the victims were sent to the Daejeong branch. Suddenly, the dangerous Gwang Sik emerges from the shadows with an insane look, challenging the boy to try to go to that location. Do Yoon ignores the arrival of the new enemy and stomps even harder on the fallen rival, demanding that he finish giving the answer. The young man maintains his intimidating posture, demanding for an opponent on the ground that he reveal all the necessary details of the plan. The defeated henchman repeats with difficulty the name of the location, confirming that the rival faction branch is the correct destination. The newcomer, Gwang Sik, displays an expression of pure hatred and questions mockingly if the boy will manage to arrive alive there. The enemy advances by surprise and grabs Yoon from behind, shouting furiously to try to immobilize the boy at any cost. The young man struggles to free himself from the rival's bare hud, who uses all his physical strength to try to suffocate him in the room. The two exchange heavy blows in an extremely balanced and violent bodily confrontation in the middle of the dark room. Gwang Sik shouts with fury upon feeling the resistance of the boy, who refuses to yield, even under his strong physical pressure. Do Yoon dodges quickly from the opponent's blow and slides along the floor, opening a perfect opening for the counterattack. The young man grabs the adversary's hair with total force, preparing himself to deliver a violent blow against his face. He applies a brutal knee strike directly against the rival's nose, making the blood splatter with the extreme force of the impact. The opponent spits a lot of blood instantly, becoming completely dazed after receiving the devastating blow. Staggering, Gwang-sik tries to keep standing while the boy prepares to deliver the final victory blow. Do-yoon delivers an overwhelming right-handed punch that hits the enemy's face squarely, destroying any chance of defense. The brutal impact throws Gwang-sik's body backward, who flies through the air with the violence of that attack from the young man. The adversary rolls heavily on the kitchen floor, scattering blood and glass shards all over the room's floor. Do-yoon walks slowly to the fallen opponent, calling him by name and demonstrating a scary coldness in his gaze. The boy warns in an intimidating way that location is definitely not the neighboring district where they used to act. He grabs Gwang-sik by the jacket collar with force, reminding the rival that now there are no bosses to protect him there. The boy pulls the enemy close to his face, demanding respect while the man makes a sound of pain and dread in the corridor. Do-yoon stares at him fixedly with his eyes shining and warns that the rival's survival in the past was not by chance. He tightens the opponent's jacket and reveals that since the beginning of his journey, he was prepared to commit the worst acts. The young Do-yoon questions him with an extremely scary look, asking if he really doubts his capacity. Do-yoon holds the bruised henchman, who can barely breathe from being beaten so much. The young man throws the rival against the floor violently, making blood splatter throughout the room. Gwang-sik coughs a lot of blood while Do-yoon stares at him from above with total coldness. Do-yoon looks into the eyes of the injured man and asks directly if he really wishes to live. Do-yoon demands that, in exchange, the criminal hand over the price charged for his own life. He grabs the rival and says that he wants to collect the life he left in the hands of Choi Dae. Yep, Do-yoon mocks the henchman, asking how someone so slow manages to survive in the world of crime. Do-yoon orders the rival to say something so serious that it would make Choi Dae kill him if he found out. Gwang-sik widens his eyes, taken by panic, and stutters without knowing how to respond to that threat. The henchman falls backward while Do-yoon asks if he has more fear of the distant boss than of him nearby. The man tries to explain himself desperately, begging for the young man to say exactly what he wants to know. Gwang-sik decides to cooperate and reveals that the kidnapped boys were sold to brothels for a high price. Do-yoon is furious at the revelation and stumps with force on the criminal's back, who lets out a groan of pain. The fallen henchman confirms with difficulty that beautiful boys are rare and very coveted by them. He says that the others go to dare him, while the second armed henchman approaches Do-yoon from behind. Suddenly, a violent and silent blow cuts through the air, scattering a large amount of blood throughout the environment. Do-yoon widens his eyes, extremely surprised to witness that unexpected scene right before him. Gwang-sik displays an expression of pure terror and agony, with blood flowing from his injured mouth. The man laments his own life in a tragic way before his senses fade away completely. The other henchman shuts Gwang-sik up once, and for all by driving a weapon into his chest to ensure he does not speak anymore. The assassin says with difficulty that if the companion was going to die anyway, he should do it alone. Gwang-sik falls dead on the floor while the red-haired henchman collapses, exhausted, beside Do-yoon. Do-yoon lets out a sigh of mockery to see the desperate attitude of that injured henchman before him. The young man walks and asks ironically if having only one broken leg was not enough yet. Do-yoon grabs the redhead henchman by the shirt and warns that, anyway, his turn to get beaten would come soon. Even bloodied, the man challenges the boy, asking what he really thinks he can do there. He shouts furiously, saying that Gwang-sik is dead, and challenges the young man to kill him once and for all. The henchman asks irritably if he really looks like a failure who yields easily to pressure. He holds Do-yoon's arm with force, complaining about cheeky youngsters who try to pass themselves off as tough guys. The criminal asks insolently if the boy will hit him again, or if he has the courage to kill him. Without hesitating, Do-yoon lands an extremely violent headbutt right in the middle of the adversary's face. The henchman screams in agony, while blood gushes from his broken nose with the brutal force of the blow. The young man grabs the enemy's head with both hands and smashes it violently against the local floor. Desperate at the overwhelming pain, the criminal begs with shouts for the boy to stop with that. Do Yoon stares at him with a dark look and delivers one more destroying impact against the man's face. The impact is so strong that new splashes of blood cover the walls and the ceiling of the hideout. Do Yoon gets up with his forehead dirty with blood, maintaining an incredibly calm and cold expression. On the verge of death, the henchman finally yields and shouts in despair the name of the Daram organization. He says, crying, that it is a small group created in Guncheong Dong by Choi Dae, hidden from Daejeong. The man begs for his life while Do Yoon displays a scary and sadistic smile before him. The boy now asks about the establishments to where the kidnapped boys were sold. The henchman reveals that the location is in the Guncheon district and swears that he really does not know anything else. He details with dread that they only delivered the victims in suitcases and received payment in the same way. The criminal begs for mercy, crying from fear of being discovered by Choi Dae, if he survives. The man promises eternal loyalty, but the young man responds coldly that the others also said that. Do Yoon wipes his own face with his arm, preparing himself to finish that violent night once and for all. The young man's red eyes shine, revealing that he has no intention of sparing the rival's life. He applies a deadly stomp against the henchman, repeating that all previous enemies begged the same way. The scene moves away, showing the silent house under the weak light of a pole in the dead of the dark night. Do Yoon turns on the faucet and begins to wash the blood from his hands while letting out a sigh of fatigue. Do Yoon cleans the dirt from his face under the light of a pole, thoughtful about the next steps of the investigation. He walks back through the dark street, muttering with disgust about the evil of those criminals who sell people. The young man picks up his cellular device and realizes that he missed several calls while he was fighting the rivals. He feels a cold sweat running down his face upon noticing that something very serious may have happened in his absence. The telephone screen shows 19 missed calls and only one new text message received a little while ago. Do Yoon despairs upon thinking about what could have happened to his family in that short interval of time. The young man's expression becomes totally dark and taken by fury upon opening the text message application. The message sent by Han Song Jae warns with urgency that his beloved sister, A Yoon, simply disappeared. Desperate, the boy runs with all his might through the dark neighborhood streets to arrive at his house soon. He opens the residence door with a violent push, shouting his sister's name in the middle of the silence. The boy runs hurriedly through the dark house rooms, searching for any sign of her presence. Do Yoon finds the room totally messy, with boxes turned over and clothes scattered all over the floor of the entrance. He contemplates the scene in a complete state of shock, realizing that his sister was indeed kidnapped right in there. The boy remembers when he told the girl to go live in the boss's safe residence for her protection. He remembers that the young girl questioned him in a sad way, asking if he really would not change his mind about that. He had said that they needed to just endure a little longer until they grew up to finally have a normal life. Do Yoon remembers that even holding the door handle firmly, he felt deep fear of what the future held. The young man guaranteed that he was doing all of that precisely so that she would never need to feel dread in life again. With tears in her eyes, the girl only asked in an affectionate way for her brother not to worry about her. Back in the present, he looks at the empty room and blames himself bitterly for having been so foolish and careless. The boy clenches his fist with so much force that his knuckles crack in the middle of that deafening silence. He breathes deeply, trying to control the anger that threatens to consume his mind and his judgment completely. Suddenly, noises of firm steps echo through the entrance corridor, announcing the arrival of a new person. The door opens and the ally, Song Jae, emerges at the residence entrance with a quite worried and tense expression. The man asks if the young man finally returned home, and Do Yoon only confirms with his head seriously. Song Jae explains that he arrived first for being nearby, but warns that the girl was certainly taken by force. Do Yoon turns with an assassin's look, while the ally reveals that neighbors saw suspicious men prowling the area. The boy questions why the enemies chose to focus on his sister instead of coming directly after him. He concludes in a dark way that the Dara Manpower organization is certainly the one largely responsible for this crime. Surprised by the cited name, Song, Jay opens a bottle of water to try to calm the young boy's tension there. The man walks through the room in silence, processing that new crucial information brought by the young man. Song, Jay questions what that small local organization could want with the young A. Yoon to the point of kidnapping her. He hands the bottle of water to Do. Yoon, opining that the two things seem to have no direct relationship. Yoon focuses his gaze on the water bottle, thinking with enough coldness about the real motives behind the attack. He holds the bottle and states with total conviction that that action indeed has everything to do with him and his revenge. The young man reveals that Daram is a small band created by Choi Dae, yep, to act hidden from the directorship itself. Song Jae ponders that it is dangerous to trust in rumors of criminals, while the boy drinks the water hurriedly. The ally observes him, worried, and asks sincerely if the young boy is okay, and if he was not injured in the fight. Yoon responds with total disdain, guaranteeing confidently that the alley criminals were nothing special. He concludes that now everyone's absolute focus must be to find and rescue Yoon as fast as possible. He explains that the director's son visited them before, and that it would be impossible for his tutor, Choi Dae, not to know anything. The experienced ally hears the explanation in silence and ends up agreeing with the young man's entire line of reasoning. He reflects, worried, that Yoon tends to be very calm but tends to act without thinking when his sister is in danger. Song, Jay concludes that the best option is to act immediately, for the boy's story makes total sense at the moment. He places his hand on Yoon's shoulder and says that he will notify the group leader, for the situation is indeed of extreme urgency. The young man questions who is on the street looking for clues, and the alley responds that the companion, Taeju, is already in the search. Song, Jay calls quickly to the boss, Moo-won, warning that the boy returned well and that he is totally unharmed. Suddenly, the ally widens his eyes upon hearing his boss's immediate response about the girl's whereabouts. Inside his vehicle, the leader, Moo-won, confirms that he just received a clue about the location of Daram. The experienced boss reveals that their secret hideout is located right at the edge of the second neighboring district. Moo-won takes the call and orders his ally to watch Yoon closely to avoid him committing some craziness. The experienced leader turns off his cellular phone with a firm snap, decided to resolve the situation personally. He mutters the name of Daram, thinking that those local criminals finally crossed all acceptable limits. Moo-won's car parks abruptly on the dark street, making a sharp sound of tires right before the ally, Taeju. The boss gets out of the vehicle while Taeju greets him with respect, informing that he just arrived at the location. Taeju finds the leader's heavy expression strange as he walks decisively and without speaking anything toward the middle of the empty street. Moo-won observes the dark building entrance, trying to analyze any suspicious movement in the base's surroundings. On the ground, two men wearing workers' uniforms lie completely knocked out after trying to confront the ally. Taeju explains that he acted quickly to neutralize the guards on the outside before they could give any alarm. The support vehicle goes away while the two mobsters prepare to invade the facilities of Daram Manpower. The ally asks if they have any leads, and Moo-won replies that the guards seem to be just henchmen acting in a rebellious manner. The boss states, with his head bowed, that someone with great power certainly gave the direct order for the kidnapping to happen. The two decide to advance together and walk firmly toward the main entrance door of that mysterious location. Taeju comments that they need to find out if that cursed Erlis guy is behind all of this terrible setup. Inside a dark warehouse, the young Yoon appears tied to a wooden chair with her mouth completely covered. The girl stares at the kidnapper with fury in her eyes while the man asks in a mocking tone if she has finally calmed down. The kidnapper smiles sadistically in the shadows and asks if she is trying to act brave or if she is just foolish. Yoon remains silent, maintaining her firm posture even while being in a situation of extreme danger in that captivity. The red-haired criminal approaches her with a wicked smile, asking if she thinks she has any salvation. He pulls the girl's hair with violence and warns, cruelly, that nothing there will go the way she had planned. The man licks his teeth with malice, complaining about having to restrain himself and not being able to do what he really wished was with her there. He grumbles that it has been a long time since he saw such a beautiful hostage being handed over for the band to work on in the region. The young girl moans in pain, trying to dodge while the criminal complains about not being able to even touch her before the official delivery. The kidnapper stares at her in a threatening way, asking if her silence is just a silly tactic to gain time. He adjusts his fists calmly, claiming that they are extremely clean professionals in their daily tasks. The villain displays an ironic smile while checking the watch on his wrist and commenting that the time for departure has finally arrived. He begins to perform a slow and threatening countdown, starting with the number 1 in a whisper in the warehouse. He says the number 2 while walking at a slow pace toward the trapped girl, who continues fighting against the ropes. Upon reaching the number 3, he focuses his sadistic gaze on the victim, who sheds a silent tear before the aggressor. Suddenly, the captivity door is opened by a henchman, warning with shouts that the transport car has just arrived. The kidnapper holds a dark hood and mocks, saying that the arrival of the transport occurred at a perfect moment. He covers Yoon's head rudely, celebrating the excellent punctuality of his henchman to carry out the shipment. With his gaze shining in the shadows, he warns in a scary way that the young girl is about to be sent to the Daejeon. Outside the warehouse, Moo-won observes the area with an expression of pure disappointment in the face of that bizarre setting of the location. Taeju accompanies the leader, observing with strangeness the large number of men who seem to be securing the entrance. Several Darum workers appear armed with iron bars, aggressively preventing the passage of the pair of mobsters. The leader of the guards warns that they received express orders to monitor that entrance closely against any intruder. The blonde man smiles with mockery and orders the 2 intruders to turn around and get out of there as quickly as possible. Shortly after, the door of one of the internal offices is opened slowly, projecting a long shadow on the floor of the location. Moo-won and Taeju enter the room extremely calmly and without showing any concern about the henchman inside. The alley comments ironically that the situation on the outside was chaotic, but the interior of the office seems quite clean. Moo-won kicks an empty can on the floor while walking toward 4 men who were drinking in a relaxed manner. Taeju looks around, observing that that building seems too big to be occupied by just 4 ordinary subjects. The boss, Moo-won, lets out a heavy sigh of fatigue, containing his fury in the face of those men who continue eating at the table. He stares at them with a deadly and scary look, demanding that they say immediately where his kidnapped girl is. Irritated by the abusive tone, the henchmen stand up, swearing at the pair and asking why they are acting in that way. One of the criminals throws a green glass bottle directly against the boss's face with all his physical strength. Moo-won remains completely motionless, demonstrating he is ready to crush anyone who tries to attack him head-on. The glass bottle passes, grazing very close to his face, but the experienced mobster does not even blink in the face of that projectile. The allied Taeju goes into action, dodging quickly from the attack and taking down one of the aggressors with a precise movement. Taeju blocks the attack of one of the opponents with ease, leaving the other rival completely scared. The ally displays a mocking smile, saying that he will not be able to restrain himself in case the enemies continue coming with everything toward him without losing time. The skillful warrior advances extremely fast against the henchmen gathered in the office. Taeju enters into direct confrontation against one of the opponents who tries to hit him using a piece of wood. The adversary widens his eyes in complete despair upon realizing the absurd agility of Taeju's attack. The ally lands a violent blow using a glass bottle against the head of the rival, who begins to bleed. The opponent collapses unconscious on the office floor under the attentive and calm gaze of the leader, Kim Moo-won. Taeju slides his feet quickly along the floor, opening space to continue his sequence of brutal blows. He delivers a precise and demolishing punch against the chin of another opponent, who staggers with the impact impact. The rival tries to resist the extreme pain, gnashing his teeth in pure anger for being dominated by the adversary. The man tries to strike back by delivering a direct punch, but Taeju dodges the attack with extreme ease. Taeju counterattacks by delivering an extremely powerful punch in the middle of the rival's chest, who loses his breath completely. He finishes the opponent with another devastating blow to the face, which throws him unconscious against the wall. The last henchman, who is still standing, decides to grab a broken glass bottle to use as a weapon. The man advances desperately toward Taeju, trying to hit the ally at any cost. Taeju lowers himself nimbly, dodging the cutting blow and opening a perfect opening for his counterattack. He approaches quickly to the enemy's unprotected guard, preparing his fist for a demolishing attack. Taeju delivers a brutal punch directly to the rival's face, making blood splatter with the extreme force of the blow. All the henchmen in the room end up defeated and stretched out on the floor, leaving only one of them who remains conscious. Suddenly, the last opponent tries a desperate reaction, lifting a wooden stick to attack. He tries to deliver a blow from top to bottom against Taeju, who remains attentive to the adversary's movement. The ally dodges the stick acrobatically, throwing his body backward and avoiding the weapon's impact. Irritated by the man's persistence, Taeju closes his expression with fury, determined to end that soon. He applies a violent blow to the rival's head, who collides heavily against the ground in a complete knockout. The man collapses fainted on the floor, while the leader observes the end of the fight with total serenity. Mu-1 walks calmly and orders his ally to stop and leave the last surviving henchman in peace. Raising his bruised fist, Taeju questions his boss about what he should do with the man who remained there. The boss says disdainfully for him to do whatever he wants, while continuing to walk toward the cornered opponent. Mu-1 approaches slowly to the injured criminal, who has fallen against the wall, and stares at him with total seriousness. The experienced leader squats before the man and demands to know immediately where his young daughter is. Stuttering from dread, the henchman alleges that another group was tasked with the kidnapping and that he should only watch the location. With an extremely cold and intimidating look, Mu-1 questions directly if the order came from Koide. Yep, the criminal becomes shaky with panic and tries to deny desperately so as not to betray his powerful mastermind. The boss grabs a sharp piece of broken glass bottle that was lying on the cold office floor. With his eyes shining in fury, he points the glass to the rival's face and repeats the question about Choi Dae. Yep. Completely terrified by the death threat, the henchman finally yields and confirms desperately that yes. Mu-1 lets out a heavy sigh of mental fatigue upon realizing that his worst rival is indeed involved in the case. The man explains that his old companions carried out the move to that new district in the past. He reveals that his superiors were the ones responsible for receiving the rival band with aggression in the region. He confesses that the band ended up calling the attention of Choi Dae, Yap, and that the field team knows the details of the action. Mu-1 interrupts him harshly, demanding to know the exact location where those cursed criminals are hiding. The henchman widens his eyes, taken by cold sweat and the dread of suffering the worst consequences right there. He reveals with dread that the group headed to the neighboring district of Guncheon to carry out a forced eviction. The criminal bows his head, bleeding from the mouth, silently hoping that the boss spares his miserable life. Satisfied with the answers obtained, the gang leader stands up imposingly, determined to initiate the rescue. He calls for the name of his faithful ally, Taeju, preparing himself to pass on the final instructions of that invasion. The boss orders seriously for the guy to clean up the whole mess of the location and find him afterward for the departure. On the outside, the leader of the guards continues talking calmly, without knowing of the carnage that occurred inside. He displays a wicked and mocking smile, ordering the intruders to get out of there once and for all before the worst happens. Suddenly, the men from Mu-1's band emerge, running by surprise and advance with fury against the entrance guards. The blonde guard mocks the situation, warning that they need to capture the boy alive at any cost. Do-yoon prepares himself to fight, while at his side the ally, Sung-jae, begins to put on his combat gloves. Suddenly, a giant and totally tattooed arm emerges from the shadows, grabbing the blonde guard from behind. The guard widens his eyes, taken by immediate panic upon feeling the overwhelming strength of that grip on his neck. The muscular warrior applies a brutal rear naked choke against the blonde henchman, who can barely breathe from so much pressure. The other guards shout furiously and surprised, asking who is the cursed bastard who dared to invade the location. The giant ally throws the fated body of the guard on the floor, demonstrating to be extremely strong and merciless. The warrior with blue hair stares at his companions and warns seriously that they are quite late there. Song Jae adjusts his gloves and responds ironically, saying that he will make up for the delay by using his brute strength. One of the guards wearing a mask advances swiftly toward the allies, determined to initiate a body-to-body combat. The opponent runs focused with a gaze taken by hatred, but the muscular ally already prepares himself to receive him head-on. The impact of the confrontation shines in the darkness, revealing that the strength of one's allies is truly insane. The masked guard collapses, knocked out on the ground, with just one precise blow delivered by the muscular group ally. The other watchman trembles with fear upon realizing that the rumors about the monstrous strength of that faction were quite real. The muscular ally delivers a violent punch that hits the watchman's face squarely, making his cap fly far away. Do-yoon watches that entire scene in silence, totally impressed by the band's ease in defeating the rivals. Song Jae walks calmly toward the last henchman, who tries to take steps backward in complete despair. The man's eyes shine in a reddish tone, revealing that he will have no mercy for the opponent. The experienced Song Jae applies an overwhelming punch that breaks the adversary's nose instantly with brutality. The guard falls fainted on the floor, while blood spatters, covering the concrete floor of that silent alley. The entire external area is now clean, with the opponents defeated and under the absolute control of Do-yoon's allies. Song Jae adjusts his coat and deduces that if the Darum was empty, the leader, One, must also have returned open-handed. Do-yoon reflects worried that the location of Darum manpower may have been just a big trap by the rivals. The alley ponders that possibly Choi Dae, Yep, and the young rich kid, Wong Sung-hyuk, decided to act separately. Meanwhile, the spoiled young Sung-hyuk walks irritably, cursing loudly because his contacts do not answer his cellular phone. The Daejeong heir shouts from pure anger upon realizing that nothing is going according to his original plan. The henchman who accompanies him warns calmly that the men probably just initiated the actions on the street. Sung-hyuk shouts furiously, demanding to know the reason for the delay, and accuses the man of defending the rival band. He grabs the accomplice by the collar, ordering him to remember his place as a subordinate before the powerful Wong family. The young rich kid curses that those henchmen were very agile to watch him but cannot carry out anything right on the street. He closes his cellular phone with force, complaining about the group's incompetence and how he had to fend for himself to survive. Sung-hyuk complains that the men sent by his father do not respect him and asks if the assessor thinks that only the father has plans. The spoiled young kid displays a manic expression and states with pride that he himself already planned every detail of that action. Back in the present, Song Jae and Do-yoon continue talking in silence, trying to guess where the girl is. Suddenly, Do-yoon recalls the words spoken by the defeated kidnapper about the Guncheong 4 Dong district. The boy finally joins the clues and realizes that the real destination of the victims is in fact the 4th district of the region. Do-yoon asks the alley for haste to notify the leader, Mo-wan, that they need to leave immediately for Guncheong. Without waiting for an answer, the young man begins to run at full speed through the dead of night, focused on saving his beloved sister. Surprised by the boy's impulsive attitude, Song Jae shouts out loud for the name of Do-yoon, trying to restrain him without success. The boy ignores the call and continues running at high speed under the confused gaze of the muscular ally, who observes. Song Jae approaches the fallen henchman, demanding the truth for knowing very well that the man is still awake on the floor. With his eyes shining in a red tone, the man asks coldly if the rival wants to continue being beaten there. Do-yoon runs hurriedly through the dark district streets, crossing empty corners with all the agility he possesses. He thinks with anger that everything would be much simpler if Choi Dae, yet were commanding the actions instead of Song Hyak. He recalls an old confrontation in which a group of delinquent students surrounded him at an alley entrance in the past. The leader of the bullies approached Do Yoon, mocking the fact that the boy had left school quite a long time ago. Another boy spat on the floor in a mocking way, commenting that he heard rumors that the boy had defeated Sung Hyak. The bully questioned him in an insolent way, asking how a wretch without money managed to do such craziness. The delinquent began to roll up his sleeves, irritated by having to clean up all the mess left by the protagonist. Do Yoon only stared at him in a cold and fearless way, while the bully prepared himself to initiate a physical confrontation. The bully tries to attack by surprise, but the boy dodges quickly and lands a violent punch directly on his face. The aggressor collapses unconscious on the alley pavement after receiving that overwhelming impact delivered by Do Yoon. The other members of the school gang observe the scene trembling with dread upon realizing the boy's overwhelming strength. The young man stares at them with his red eyes shining and states coldly that they continue to think like children. One of the delinquents retreats scared, cursing out loud that Do Yoon is in fact a cursed, complete psychopath. The boy walks calmly, saying that this childish behavior is the reason why Sung Hyuk and his band always fail. Another boy tries to attack him in a cowardly way from behind, but Do Yoon perceives the approach and spins quickly. The aggressor widens his eyes upon realizing that his attempt at an ambush was totally foreseen by the young man. Without showing any mercy, the young man lands a brutal knee strike right in the delinquent's stomach, who falls without strength. The delinquent's body collides with force against the dark street floor, echoing a dry noise in the dead of night. The defeated bully moans in pain on the pavement, completely unable to carry out any type of physical reaction there. Do Yoon observes him from above with total disdain, keeping his mind focused on rescuing his beloved kidnapped sister. He takes a step forward, putting on his black shoe firmly and decisively in the middle of that silent alley. The boy stares at the other members and curses against Sung Hyuk. Realizing how much that rich rival is a coward, he mocks the delinquents, asking what they expected to achieve by sending only idiot boys for combat. The young man walks back, concluding that that silly ambush just confirmed Sung Hyuk's direct involvement. The boys go into panic and begin to argue among themselves, shouting for them to call the other lower members. The boy stops his walk upon hearing that there are more enemies lurking and stares at them with a curious expression. The delinquents begin to retreat desperately while dragging the knocked out companions far from there. Kim Moo-won reflects that if Do Yoon does not learn to deal with his own battles now, he will be traumatized in the future. He touches the shoulder of his ally Doojin, stating proudly that the boy is much smarter than the rest of the band. Doojin agrees, letting out a sigh of fatigue, and decides that the best path for now is just to watch the boy. The experienced leader warns that Choi Dae-yeop has acted with speed, and that the Daeram possesses more members than expected. The ally states seriously that as soon as they rescue Yoon, the maximum priority will be to annihilate Daeram once and for all. The warrior with blue hair questions if there is new concrete information about the current whereabouts of the abducted girl. The boss decides that he will personally monitor the actions of Daejeong and asks for them to send messages if something changes. One concludes that the fact that the director and Choi Dae-yeop are acting separately is their perfect opportunity. Inside the captivity, the henchman carries the faded young Yoon on his shoulders, going up the stone steps. He walks heavily along the building's dark stairs, keeping the hostage tied under total control of the band. The kidnappers go down toward the deserted street, grumbling in a mocking tone about the success of that dirty mission. The henchman throws the girl on the back seat of a car, thanking his accomplice for the excellent help in carrying out the plan. Hidden behind a wall, Do Yoon spies on the criminal's movements in the dead of night with total attention. The young man analyzes the location silently and realizes with relief that the Daejeong members are not guarding the area. One of the Daeram guards pulls out his cellular phone in the middle of the alley and asks the mastermind what they should do now. Back at the confrontation alley, Do Yoon stares coldly at the injured school bullies who continue fallen on the pavement. The young man crushes the delinquent's chest with his foot, demanding immediate answers about Sung Hyuk's plans. He lets out a sigh of mockery, contemplating the defeated band that continues crying from pain due to the beating they took. Yoon questions them in an intimidating way, asking if the real goal of that silly fight was just to gain time. He walks calmly toward one of the injured boys, saying that he finds that type of play very irritating. The boy squats and begins to search the pockets of the fallen bully's pants, who asks scared what he is doing. Yoon ignores the question and removes the green cellular phone from the boy's pocket, warning that he will borrow the device. The delinquent shouts furiously and scared, calling him crazy for stealing the phone in the middle of that mess in the alley. Without patience, Yoon shuts the guy's mouth by delivering one more brutal punch directly against his face, which begins to bleed again. The boy finishes by delivering a violent kick in the opponent's stomach, guaranteeing that he does not attempt any new reaction. Yoon stares at him with his red eyes and asks ironically if that is not precisely the type of favor that friends do. He puts the phone in his jacket pocket and warns coldly that he is just taking a loan from a school friend. Yoon opens the cellular device and answers the call that just started to ring insistently on the green display. On the line, Sung Hayek's irritated voice demands with shouts that the henchman end the cursed one, Yoon's life soon. Yoon responds on the call in an extremely scary way, ordering the wretched kid to stop everything if he wants to live. He shouts furiously that he only accepted to endure the rival's provocations in the school environment and hangs up the cellular phone. Sung Hayek shouts furiously, asking the reason for the rival to be answering the call from his accomplice's phone. Yoon turns off the device with a dry snap, letting out a long sigh of fatigue after confirming his suspicions. The boy concludes that the young rich hair is indeed the true mastermind behind that whole terrible setup. He raises his foot over the fallen bully and promises that he will end that clowning once and for all so that he never disturbs him again. Suddenly, the boy hesitates for a brief moment in the middle of his attack move and resolves to interrupt the final stomp. Back in the present, Yoon warns the ally Dujin that they need to go down the stairs and leave there immediately. Dujin agrees with his head and reinforces with total seriousness that they definitely do not have more time to lose. The two companions walk hurriedly toward that building's exit to initiate the new phase of the rescue. The protagonist walks in silence, letting out a heavy sigh while he follows the imposing alley along the dark corridors. He throws the green cellular device that he had borrowed directly against the asphalt ground of that alley. The object collides violently with the ground and shatters into several pieces of plastic in the middle of the empty district street. The device's broken screen begins to vibrate, showing that the wretched kid, Sung Hayek, continues trying to call insistently. At the captivity location, the accomplice with shaved hair warns the boss that he will make the trip accommodated on the car's backseat. The local faction leader, Park Jong-hyeon, complains irritably with the accomplices, stating that that hostage is not his problem. He delivers a violent slap against the henchman's neck, complaining about the silly excuses given by the man to justify the failure. The dangerous Jong-hyeon turns suddenly with a manic gaze, questioning the aggressive staring of the other henchmen. Several Daram manpower members emerge armed, demanding explanations from those men who are invading their territory. The Daram henchmen go to the attack with their iron bars, initiating a big generalized mess on the street. Jong-hyeon mocks the rival band and comments that the masterminds omitted details of extreme importance about that work. He states, laughing, that in the face of such a mess, he will charge a price 4 times higher to carry out Yoon's delivery. The mobster calls Sung Hayek back, demanding explanations in an aggressive way for having made the situation too easy. The henchman with shaved hair advances, focused in the middle of the fight, while the boss remains observing the aggressions from afar. The two groups exchange extremely violent blows, with punches and brutal aggressions on both sides in the middle of the dark street. The strong henchman with shaved hair delivers a devastating punch that breaks the masked opponent's tooth with brutality. Jong-hyeon gets scared at the rival's combat power, admitting that he underestimated them by thinking they were just delinquents. One of the mobster's allies delivers a precise right-handed punch against the Darum worker's chin, who falls unconscious. The beatings continue with fast movements and clenched fists crossing the air with extreme speed and violence on the street. Another masked henchman is hit by a terrible impact that throws him backward against the cold district asphalt. The generalized fight goes out of control, with the henchmen exchanging demolishing punches and falling bloodied on the floor. The alley shouts desperately, warning the boss that their time is up and they need to flee from there with the hostage. Cursing from pure anger, Jong Hein opens the car door, determined to abandon his accomplices to save his skin. The mobster takes the driver's seat of the vehicle, shouting irritably that he already knows the gravity and that he will depart immediately. The car flees at high speed while the leader complains that whole simple operation ended up becoming a complete mess. He gnashes his teeth from hatred and promises that he will make it a point to take revenge on Darum manpower as soon as he resolves that delivery. The vehicle pulls away abruptly, raising a big dust curtain in the middle of the empty street while it flees along the avenue. Suddenly, Do Yoon emerges piloting a fast motorcycle and initiates an relentless pursuit against the kidnapper's car. The protagonist's bike collides laterally against the moving car, causing sparks in the middle of that dark avenue. The monster inside the vehicle gets quite scared by the aggressiveness of that maneuver and shouts, without understanding what is happening there. Do Yoon rolls along the asphalt acrobatically and comments to himself that risky maneuver was indeed a very close call. He rises with his gaze taken by fury and declares with total conviction that regardless of the location, they will pay. With his red eyes shining intensely in the shadow of the alley, he swears silently that all those men will die. Back at the alley flashback, the young man delivers a brutal punch directly against the face of one of the delinquents who surrounded him. He thinks, anguished, that he is late to save his sister and that every lost second can be fatal to her safety. That the boy applies a devastating kick on another rival, feeling guilty for Yoon having been hurt because of his actions. He throws the last opponent on the floor, lamenting that the abduction happened right after asking the girl not to worry. The young man sheds tears of anger upon remembering that he had promised confidently that he would be capable of protecting her from everything. The allied Doojin observes Do Yoon's despair with an understanding look, knowing the weight that the young man carries on his back. The muscular warrior tries to calm the protagonist, saying that they just had the bad luck of suffering an unforeseen ambush. He places his hand on Do Yoon's shoulder and comforts the boy, saying that he definitely should not apologize for that. Do Yoon focuses his determined gaze into the darkness, swearing that he will do everything to bring his younger sister back alive. Two men observe a mysterious silhouette standing under the strong light of the headlights in the middle of the dark street. Do Yoon emerges with a dark look and says that he does not care if that is the right place or not. He stares at the enemy with fury in his red eyes and guarantees that everyone there is already dead. The driver hits his hands on the steering wheel with a lot of anger, trying desperately to control the situation. Jong Hein curses furiously inside the car, complaining about having to deal with that crazy guy. Suddenly, a strong hand emerges from the car's back seat and grabs his coat with violence. He lets out a choke of surprise upon being pulled backward suddenly by the neck. At that moment, he remembers when the experienced warrior taught self-defense techniques in the backyard. Little Yoon observed the whole training from afar with a very focused and attentive gaze. The man demonstrated in practice how to immobilize an adversary by holding the boy from behind. Yoon tightens the mobster's neck, realizing that old technique really works in practice. She strives to the maximum to maintain the blow, thinking that they should not have carried out that ambush. The man begins to suffocate for real and tries desperately to get rid of that firm grip. He manages to turn furiously, shouting that he was going to spare her life for not being his property. The mobster delivers a violent blow against the girl's face, saying that he will not make things easy. The kidnapper gets scared upon seeing Do Yoon emerge suddenly right beside the car door. A firm hand grabs the villain's back and pulls him violently out of the moving vehicle. The man collides with force against the street's cold asphalt, while Do Yoon stares at him with coldness. The mobster gets up with difficulty, holding his throat and trying to recover his lost breath. He gnashes his teeth furiously, wondering what type of idiots without fear were those guys. The young man stares at him from above with mockery, saying that in the end of it all they are just weak. The villain advances, delivering a strong punch on Do Yoon's face, shouting that he forgot what it is like to be beaten. He mocks, asking if Do Yoon went crazy now that he lost everything he had to sell. Do Yoon smiles in a scary way, saying that he just let the enemy land a silly blow. The two warriors take distance, prepare themselves for a direct combat in the middle of the deserted street. Do Yoon grabs the adversary's face firmly, stating that he already expected that confrontation. The young man says with disdain that he would never pretend to work for the rival if it were not for the difficult situation. In the memory, the bearded leader commented resignedly that they would have to accept that bad situation. The other ally responds that they should accept the proposal, even if it were something very questionable. The boss insisted that they could not send the boys to work in dangerous establishments. The ally questions irritably how they would justify the accounts to the Huxiong organization. Back to the fight, Do Yoon lands a violent blow against the opponent, mocking his skills. The young man throws him to the floor, stating with contempt that the gutter is the only place that suits him. The fallen villain wipes the blood from his nose while looking at the boy with an indescribable hatred in his gaze. He gets up quickly and tries to deliver a punch, but Do Yoon blocks the attack with ease. The guy dodges another blow, delivering an agile counterattack that destabilizes the adversary. The mobster gets scared upon realizing that he cannot even follow the rival's fast movements. A demolishing impact hits the villain's mouth, making him lose his balance in a definitive way. He staggers backward, completely defeated, while spitting blood due to the strength of that punch. Do Yoon observes him on the floor and warns coldly for him to prepare himself to return to his due place. The inert body of the defeated mobster is dragged along the asphalt without showing any physical reaction. Doojin ties the criminal under the pole light, while the other ally arrives to verify the situation. The villain is left completely fainted and immobilized in the dark sidewalk corner of that district. The experienced bearded warrior walks back beside Yoon, who is finally safe and sound. He turns to the girl and says in a friendly way for her to accompany him to his warehouse as well. The young girl agrees timidly with her head, accepting the invitation of that strong, protecting ally. The man praises her decision, stating that living in debt and crazy like Do Yoon is no life for anyone. She stops her steps suddenly, letting out a thoughtful sigh in the middle of the deserted path. The young girl stares at her brother's companion and begins to speak something very important with hesitation. She remembers the injured leader who ordered desperately for everyone to retreat from that dangerous location. He remembers the leader in the excavator cabin, staring at the situation with amazement upon hearing that ironic question. The subordinate warns the commander, Kim Moo-won, that they received express orders to retreat immediately from there. The experienced bearded warrior stares at the mysterious man in glasses, asking scared who he really is. The man in glasses introduces himself as Shindok Chol and mocks, asking if they are already becoming senile once and for all. He reinforces his name, saying with mockery that he used to be the former vice leader of the 3rd demolition team. The villain walks in an arrogant way, commenting that he still occupies the same position of power to this day. He adjusts his glasses, smiling while remembering that the important thing was just to obey the order to retreat. He hands an envelope to the companion, warning that if it depended on him, he would have destroyed that whole place once and for all. The guy in glasses comments, laughing, that their target in the end of it all is a wretch very difficult to die. He points his clenched fist in a threatening way, saying that he brought a special gift to end the laziness. The young man with gray hair approaches and demands coldly that the villain maintain respect and composure there. Duck. Chol grabs the boy's head with extreme violence, asking if he forgot how he should greet the master. The villain keeps his hand firm on the opponent's head, demanding in an authoritative way that he stop complaining. He mocks the young man, remembering that he was punished in the past, and challenges him to take a step forward to fight. He crumples the paper with anger, asking if the boy would be capable of dealing alone with the terrible consequences. The man in glasses gnashes his teeth, feeling a growing fury upon realizing that he is being very provoked. That the two close their fists with extreme strength, while the villain warns that he will only tolerate that for a single month. He turns his back, staring at the young man askance, and reaffirms that the final deadline of his patience is 30 days. The villain bumps aggressively with his shoulder on the boy, saying that he will not accept any type of silly excuse. He moves away with long strides, cursing Iram hatred while the other warrior just observes his exit. The young man cracks his neck decisively while staring at the horizon colored by the city's beautiful sunset. The boy warns seriously that he will take care personally of transmitting all the information to the companions. The experienced bearded warrior agrees with his head, maintaining his thoughtful expression in the face of the situation. The young Yoon stares at the men with an extremely worried expression, and her fists clenched to her chest. Suddenly, the scene changes to the memory of a gigantic excavator knocking down the walls of an old house. Yoon remembers with dread when the villain was left hanging upside down in the middle of that destruction. The bearded warrior reflects in the dark room that the Huxiang organization did in fact send that terrible demolitionist. The document on the table brings a warning that the area members will become targets of a very rigorous internal investigation. The bearded boss comments to Yoon that they definitely cannot trust any of those official papers. Yoon stands up with fury in his red eyes, guaranteeing that he will resolve the problem before it gets worse once and for all. The boss asks for calm, saying that it is still early, and tasks Jiu with monitoring every step of that demolitionist. Jiu agrees immediately with his head, accepting the important mission of watching the former alley closely. Back in the present at the warehouse, the young Yoon lets out a long sigh of relief for finally being in safety. Jiu approaches and asks in a gentle way if she is okay, receiving an honest but full of hope answer. She looks at him timidly and comments that there seem to be many dangerous conspiracies behind that whole story. The boy tries to comfort the girl, saying that nothing bad will happen and that everything in the end will work out for them. She smiles relieved and asks the young man if she can make a sincere questioning about what happened in the location. Jiu reveals that the man in glasses in the excavator was his trusted veteran from the former demolition team. The scene focuses on the school years of the young Jiu walking alone, with a look quite different from the current one. In that era, the boy came across an alley full of delinquents fallen on the floor after a violent fight. It was in that moment that the arrogant Shin Diak Chol approached, smiling, and praised the incredible fury of combat of the young man. The veteran extended his business card, inviting the boy to work together with him in the big organization. The card brought the name of Shin Dak Chol as vice chief of the 3rd demolition team of Huxiang. The man explained in a cold way that the base of that cleaning team consisted purely of using extreme violence. He stated with a psychopath smile that their work was simply to crush anyone who entered the way. Back to the past, the villain held a huge iron sledgehammer that threw off shining sparks when hitting the asphalt. His hands, dressed in white gloves, were already stained with blood, showing the brutality of his real actions. The young Taeju ran swiftly along the streets, accompanying closely his new and dangerous mentor in glasses. The boy delivers a devastating punch straight against the chest of the masked opponent, throwing him with a lot of force. Meanwhile, the insane Dauk Chol raised his heavy sledgehammer in the air, preparing himself to deliver one more brutal blow. Ju comments that in a way, it was thanks to that mysterious man that he ended up meeting the leader, Mu Wan. The young girl hears everything in silence, trying to understand the complex relations and secrets of the past of those men. Suddenly, the warehouse door is opened brutally with Yoon emerging desperate and shouting for his sister's name. The boy runs to meet Yoon while the girl stands up quickly to hug her dear brother. The two hug with a lot of strength in the middle of the warehouse in a moment of extreme relief and emotion for both. The bearded boss observes the emotional reunion of the siblings with a thoughtful and relieved expression at the same time. The experienced warrior narrows his eyes, focusing his attention on the next difficult steps they must take. Dujin approaches the boss, asking for sincere apologies for the delay, and asks if any more mess occurred there. The alley points surprised to the destroyed wall, questioning what that huge excavator would be doing parked there. The boss tells that the Matrix sent the terrible demolitionist, Shundok Call, with express orders to end everything. Dujin wonders quite a lot about the situation, asking the reason for a member of the cleaning team to be taking care of that. The bearded leader explains that the subject for sure suspects them for being very close to the rival, Choide. Yi Tae-yu approaches, apologizing for the interruption, and decides to show something very important to the companions. The guy points to the kidnapped mobster, trapped upside down, and questions what they should do with him. The villain opens his eyes, scared upon realizing that he finally regained consciousness in the middle of that warehouse. The imposing bearded leader stares at him with absolute coldness and warns that the best path now is just to get rid of him. Tae-ju agrees, smiling ironically, and walks slowly toward the prisoner hanging on the wall. He holds the green adhesive tape firmly and tears it from the mobster's mouth with a quick and abrupt movement. The man enters into desperate panic, begging for his life and swearing that he only took care of the organization's paperwork. The guy squats before the hostage and mocks him, asking why he stopped acting in such an arrogant way. The guy mocks his threats, saying that he promised to act like a dog, but there is no dog there. The humiliated mobster begins to bark desperately in the desperate attempt to prove his total submission. He continues barking without stopping, stating that indeed he can be extremely useful to the band if they spare his life. Do-yoon observes that ridiculous scene with deep indignation and curses against the lack of pride of the mobster. The guy orders the man to shut his mouth once, warning that ridiculous behavior is a terrible example. He puts the adhesive tape back on the hostage's mouth, stifling immediately his pathetic shouts and barks. The young man lets out a sigh of extreme disdain, murmuring that wretch really is a complete lunatic. The young man with gray hair turns to Do-yoon with a serious expression, concluding that his situation is resolved. Suddenly, Do-yoon tries to advance, but Tae-ju places his hand on his chest, asking the boy to wait for an instant. The guy releases the ropes, making the mobster fall backward in a heavy way directly against the concrete floor. An imposing and furious hand grabs the villain's collar with extreme strength, preventing any type of escape. Dune stares at him with fury in his eyes, demanding to know exactly what useful secrets the criminal has to reveal. The mobster trembles from dread, staring at the red eyes of the protagonist, who orders that he think well before speaking. The young man warns with a cold voice that he really expects to obtain very useful answers during that conversation. Do-yoon grabs the man by the collar, demanding to know exactly what he can do to help them. The young man warns him seriously to think very carefully before he speaks. The young man with red eyes threatens him, saying he better make sure his answer is worth something. The man begins to beg desperately for the chance to stay alive. He nervously explains that he overheard their conversation and knows they are in a difficult situation. Do-yoon questions if his plan is to sell lives for money, just like he did with the kidnapped orphans. The subject quickly denies it and suggests using a financial quota from the hook shown to solve the problem. Tae-ju comments next that their group usually generates a lot of revenue most of the time. The gray-haired young man looks to the side while the bearded leader follows the conversation closely. The bearded boss decides it is best to continue that discussion only when Song-jae finally arrives. The prisoner bows deeply to the ground, thanking them in an exaggerated way for their mercy. The leader looks at the bowing man with contempt and coldly orders his allies to tie him up again. The ally obeys promptly and begins to immobilize the prisoner using green adhesive tape. The prisoner continues trying to convince them that the money from that deal is completely clean. Do-yoon lets out a heavy sigh, trying to contain his anger at the absurd situation. The young woman watches her brother with concern, wondering what exactly he plans to do next. The gagged prisoner tries to say something, but can only emit muffled moans of panic. In the next scene, a conversation reveals that Do-yoon was intercepted by henchmen at the behest of the director's son. The bearded boss comments that Do-yoon seemed to be the true target of that whole operation from the start. The The ally in the white shirt agrees, saying the director's group was clearly focused on capturing Do Yoon. He adds that the enemies retreated and scattered as soon as they failed to capture young Yoon. The man drinks straight from the bottle and reveals that another rival has also been hunting the protagonist lately. The bearded leader states that they need to reinforce the young man's security and that it was a good decision to keep him close. The companion agrees thoughtfully with the boss's words while holding his glass at the table. He warns that if the two rival factions act together, they will not have time to put the plan into action. The boss agrees, saying it makes no sense to face both groups at the same time if they can buy some time. The ally suggests using a smaller gang to pay the required amount and distract the rival leader's attention. He adds an important detail about a rival who acted in secret without the other faction knowing. The leader orders his men to investigate thoroughly, as that enemy must have more hidden secrets. He then confesses that the real headache at the moment is a person named Park Jong-hyun. The boss remembers that the prisoner tried to hurt young Yoon, and no one will forget that easily. The man scratches his head, admitting that the hostage's situation is complicated and difficult to resolve right now. He decides that the best thing for now is to leave the prisoner tied up until things calm down a bit. The leader asks his partner to take care of the report for headquarters and says goodbye, wishing him a safe trip home. He walks alone back along the dark city sidewalk, feeling the weight of the problems on his mind. The man wonders thoughtfully how long it has been since someone was waiting for him upon returning home. He stops in front of his residence's gate, not knowing exactly what to say when entering at that moment. Upon opening the door, the boss is surprised to see the young people organizing moving boxes in the living room. The tattooed ally greets the leader back, and he responds shyly, confirming he has returned. The young woman thanks the boss emotionally for having gone to rescue her and saved her life in such a heroic way. The man says she should be resting and asks curiously what all those boxes are doing there. The girl explains sheepishly that she wanted to help in some way, since they are going to live together now. He strokes her head with affection and says that family does not work that way, and she does not need to repay him. The leader asks if she is hurt, and the young woman answers with a smile that she is fine thanks to their quick arrival. Do Yoon walks away suddenly toward the kitchen, remembering something important he needed to do. The young man returns carrying a pot of hot stew, saying he was waiting for them to have dinner together. He puts the food on the table and comments that a person always needs someone to share meals with. The boss remembers an old conversation about how a real meal should never be enjoyed in solitude. The man looks at the young people with a deeply moved gaze as he relives that sweet memory from the past. He lets out a long sigh and invites everyone joyfully to sit down and enjoy that banquet together. Do Yoon smiles and comments that this is their first meal as a family and that they should enjoy the food. The bearded boss says they need to talk later, but the young man soon corrects him about his own name. The leader watches the steaming stew being lifted by the chopsticks, quite silently and calmly. The young man states seriously that his official name is now Kim Do Yoon and everyone needs to get used to it. The experienced bearded warrior is a bit confused, commenting that that revelation came out of absolutely nowhere. Do Yoon offers sincere apologies to everyone present while serving some hot food for his sister. He acknowledges that everyone went through danger because of him and promises his father that he will prioritize safety from now on. The older man lets out a sigh and says that hearing that from the young man is enough to make him a little more at ease. The bearded boss closes his eyes for an instant and invites everyone in a friendly way to eat quickly. The trio begins to eat the stew very hungrily, sharing that rare moment of peace and relaxation. Do Yoon enjoys the hot meal with great appetite, finally recovering his energy after the battle. Young Yoon smiles in an extremely sweet and relieved way to be surrounded by people who truly protect her. Night falls over the quiet neighborhood, bringing a welcoming feeling that they now really seem like a family. The next morning, the sunlight enters the room, while the big burly, Ali continues to sleep heavily on the floor. Yoon wakes up early and analyzes the documents sent by his father's company, trying to understand the mystery of the excavator. He finds the demands regarding the source of the money strange and tries to decipher the true goal of that rival faction. The young man reflects on whether the aggressive actions are actually motivated by some personal grudge from one of the criminals. The protagonist decides he needs to interrogate the older allies to find out who is really on his side. The young man goes through the papers, knowing most of them are enemies, but any extra ally would be a huge help right now. With that in mind, he plans to suggest hiring new members, including a strong man he met before. Suddenly, the young man's cell phone begins to vibrate on the table, calling his attention early in the morning. He holds the shining device with curiosity to check who would be sending a message at that hour. The message on the screen notifies that the report was sent successfully thanks to the good work done by Jiu in the past. Yoon is surprised to read that the report has already been delivered and begins to think about the consequences of that for the gang. A mouth smiles maliciously, suggesting that the captured kidnapper has finally lost all his real utility. Meanwhile, at the large headquarters of the Daejeong organization, the mood in the silent corridors seems quite tense. The brown-haired boss hits the table with great force, yelling furiously at the failure of his subordinates. He rants with hatred, asking why they interfered and wasted such a valuable opportunity for the gang. The henchman with the bandaged nose tries to stutter an excuse, but is immediately interrupted brutally by his superior. The leader tells the subordinate to be quiet and orders him to lair immediately, to send the rival into the room. The large office door is opened abruptly, revealing the imposing arrival of the next member of the group. The man with the injured nose passes by the newcomer, complaining that strange subjects appeared and ruined the plan. He warns the feared ally to enter quickly before the faction's big boss gets even more irritated with everything. The strong warrior in a suit enters the meeting room, bowing respectfully before his superior. The boss reports that the biggest problem is not the invaders, but the fact that an important ally has been captured. The leader looks at the assassin with a cold gaze and orders him to take personal care of resolving that critical situation. The scene changes to a man with a shaved head walking seriously toward the office of the Gu Nilpa gang. He stops in the middle of the street, staring at the immense excavator and whispering his rival Kim Moo, one's name with great anger. A memory of the night before shows the henchman with the shaved head confronting the experienced Moo, one directly. He challenges his opponent with fury in his eyes, asking arrogantly if he also wants to pass away right there. The bearded warrior maintains his posture completely calm and warns in a cold tone that that is already enough. Taken by fury, the henchman advances quickly, throwing a violent punch at the experienced bearded leader. Moo-1 dodges with mastery and hits a precise blow against the rival's legs, making him lose his balance. The adversary staggers disoriented while the bearded master positions himself calmly right behind his back. The experienced warrior delivers an extremely devastating blow to the opponent's neck without giving him a chance to defend. The attacker falls completely knocked out on the concrete floor of that dark alley, unable to show any reaction. The leader comments coldly that he already has someone useful to talk to and therefore does not need the rest of the henchmen there. The henchman on the floor notices the opponent's absurd strength and grumbles with difficulty that he is not yet completely defeated. Back to the present. The man with the shaved head enters the office in a hurry, calling for his boss urgently. He introduces himself a Jang man, Jew, and warns by shouting that he has come personally to rescue his respected leader from the place. Tae, Jew, and Dujin look surprised at the sudden arrival of that invader, who is yelling in the middle of the office. They comment that the audacity of that subject and appearing there indicates that something very strange is happening in the gang. The invader screams furiously, demanding that they immediately return his boss Park Jong, high and safe and sound. Tae, Ji-yu warns that their own boss is missing and tells the invader to look for trouble elsewhere, so he does not end up hurt. Jung Man, Ju becomes extremely irritated, thinking they are trying to trick him with that silly answer. The henchman leaves aggressively for the attack, running toward Tae-ju with his fist closed. The gray-haired young man repeats that his boss is missing and asks why he insists on looking for him there. The invader throws a fast punch, trying to hit the young man's face in any way he can. Tae-ju dodges the powerful punch with extreme agility, showing that his reflexes are much superior. He easily deviates from another attack by the enemy, keeping his guard well positioned and calm. The young man takes advantage of the opening to apply a powerful punch directly to the henchman's rib, who feels the impact. He looks at the opponent with seriousness, preparing to finish the fight without wasting any more time there. The young man throws another brutal punch that hits the adversary's face squarely in a devastating way. The henchman grinds his teeth in anger and tries to recover from that relentless blow to counterattack. He decides that he needs to defeat the young man quickly before he becomes an even bigger problem in the fight. The gray-haired young man blocks the investiture and connects another devastating blow, making the enemy stagger backward. The impact makes the henchman spit blood and completely lose his base in the face of the counterattack's strength. Dujin just watches the fight with a calm countenance, knowing that his ally has total control of the situation. Tae-ju finishes the sequence with a spectacular kick that throws the opponent's body away violently. The invader groans in pain, feeling that his body cannot handle the weight of those consecutive attacks. He collapses heavily against the office floor, completely defeated by that sequence of blows. The gray-haired young man walks slowly to the man fallen on the floor to end the discussion once and for all. The henchman looks at the young man with dread, realizing that Kim Moo-won was not the only dangerous monster of that group. The young man faces the fallen invader with coldness and asks who exactly he thinks he is to act that way. The scene shows the fast blows the young man used to subdue the adversary with such ease and dexterity. The rapid exchange of attacks reveals the allies' enormous technical superiority, which gave the invader no chance of reaction. He maintained his absolute focus during the entire clash, showing the result of his years of training. The man with the shaved head yells in hatred upon realizing he was humiliated and defeated in such an overwhelming way. A final punch hits the subject's face with extreme violence, ending any possibility of him getting up. The opponent's body topples inert after receiving the last decisive punch of that quick and unilateral combat. The enemy falls unconscious, spreading blood on the concrete floor of the office, which now returns to being silent. He is left stretched on the floor, completely without strength and with his face quite bruised due to the beating he took. Tae-ju catches his breath, commenting that it had been a while since he felt tired just from knocking out an opponent. The bruised man asks with difficulty who they are, as he knows that no common delinquent would fight in that way. Dujin analyzes the situation and says that the fact the subject could withstand so many blows indicates a link to another faction. He adds that the man is a subordinate of Park Jong-hyun, and it would be foolish not to be suspicious of that relationship. The bloodied invader insists irritably, saying he does not know what they are talking about, and demands the return of his boss. Both realize that the prisoner will not cooperate and decide to keep him in custody for a little longer there. The ally in the white shirt states that they still need to locate the whereabouts of their true leader. In another location, a mysterious woman with long hair observes the landscape from the bedroom window early in the morning. She analyzes an official report and realizes that Park Jong-hyun's men act under very clear identities. Jewel, who, in her robe, looks at the horizon thoughtfully, commenting that the whole situation has just become very confusing. She praises the precision of the information gathered by her shirtless partner, who is accompanying her in the room. Black-haired young man comments with a smile that she woke up very early and praises the comfort of the place's bed. The woman asks him coldly to leave, but the young man questions the reason for so much sudden coldness from her. She explains that she is going to meet some friends at night and asks for his car keys to go to the place. Hoi presses the enter button with seriousness and orders the guards coldly to take the subject out of there. A security guard in a suit enters the room quickly and immobilizes the shirtless young man, throwing him onto the bed with violence. The guard begins to throw blows at the young man, while the woman just watches the scene without showing emotion. The young man ends up completely completely bloodied and bruised on the floor, letting out moans of pain after the severe punishment. Jiu Hui praises the work of the Huxiang guards and orders coldly that they prepare a car for her to leave there. The elegant white vehicle speeds through the quiet city streets, cutting through the wind under the reddish sky. She observes the landscape through the car window, complaining in thought about the dirt and the bad smell of that place. The woman pinches her nose, bored, commenting to herself that that decadent neighborhood seems like the ideal place for an exile. Suddenly, she feels a strange jolt in the vehicle and curses irritably, trying to understand what happened. The driver warns with concern that they have just run over something and opens the door quickly to check the track. The woman waits in the back seat until the employee returns scared, saying they have a very serious problem. She lets out a sigh of disbelief and decides to get out of the vehicle to see personally what is blocking the way. The woman adjusts her glasses irritably, wondering what on earth is happening to delay her trip at that hour. She remembers the enormous internal pressure the company is under to remove the experienced Kim Moo-won from his leadership position. Suddenly, the executive's eyes widen with astonishment as she focuses on the face of the person thrown in the middle of the dark asphalt. She lets out a high-pitched scream of pure terror upon immediately recognizing the identity of that man fallen on the track. The woman loses her balance and collapses, sitting on the asphalt floor due to the immense shock of seeing that bizarre scene. She rants furiously at the driver, accusing the employee of driving without paying attention to the road in front of him. The driver defends himself by stuttering that there was no one on the track. The man was already lying there before the impact. She approaches with caution and notices, shocked, that the subject's arms are firmly tied behind his back. The executive confirms in a serious tone that the man was indeed immobilized and left there in a totally intentional way. She looks at the bruised face of the unconscious man and begins to suspect that he is someone quite influential in the area. The woman mumbles the name of Park Jong-hyun, almost not believing that such a powerful criminal leader would end up like that. She analyzes the details of the wounded man's countenance, trying to be absolutely sure that she is not making any mistake. The bloodied body above Park Jong-hyun lies motionless on the floor under the incredulous gaze of the Huxiang executive. She crosses her arms and lets out a long sigh, cursing the terrible bad luck she had that morning. The executive crouches down and begins to examine the wounded man with attention to verify the real severity of his bodily injuries. The driver follows his superior's movements with a very worried countenance in the face of that mystery. She puts a piece of gum in her mouth thoughtfully, trying to stay calm to make the best decision in the face of the case. The woman in high heels walks slowly around the fallen ally, analyzing the surroundings to see if there are witnesses. Suddenly, she delivers a violent kick against the driver's shin, demonstrating all her accumulated fury and frustration. The executive covers her face, stressed, and asks the subordinate if the man on the asphalt still shows signs of breathing. She orders severely that they take the wounded man to the nearest hospital immediately to try to save his life once and for all. The employee obeys quickly, lifting the criminal leader's body with care to accommodate him in the vehicle's seat. He comments that the run-in was not so serious, and that the man only broke his arm, but is not at immediate risk of passing away. The employee gives light slaps on Park Jong-hyun's face, trying to wake him up, and asks the reason for him being thrown there. He laments irritably, saying that the whole tiring trip to that decadent neighborhood would have been a complete waste of time. The executive gets a slight fright from her subordinate's reaction and asks what exactly they should do next. The employee analyzes the burn marks and needle pricks on the wounded man's neck, drawing intriguing conclusions. He concludes that the attackers never planned to end him, but rather to give a violent beating as a clear warning. The memory of the terrible beating resurfaces in their minds, showing the leader's screams of pain under the enemy torture. She reflects that Park Jong-hyun tried to find a weakness in the rival Kim Moo-won but ended up having his own ruin exposed. The executive looks at the silent asphalt, wondering the strategic motive for having discarded that important ally there. In another street in Guncheong-dong, young Tae-ju walks calmly while talking to someone on his cell phone. He suspects that someone may have eliminated the rival cleanly without their grouping, needing to get their hands dirty in the process. Suddenly, the young man stops his steps upon seeing something totally unexpected and warns that he has located his target there. He observes from afar the executive Jew, high beside the driver with the body of Park Jeong, high and stretched out in the middle of the dark street. He puts his cell phone in his pocket, sighing in frustration for realizing that the woman there is precisely the dangerous Lee Ju Hui. The young man ponders for a second if he should simply pass straight and ignore them, but concludes that this would be impossible. He remembers when he met her in the past at the moment when she asked in a serious way if he was Bang Tae Ju. At that time, she introduced herself as a new employee of the Human Resources Department, charging him with compliance with the rules. She explained rigidly that the lack of appropriate clothing could harm the company's internal and external image. The young man listened to the complaints with boredom and, ironically for her, to explain the meaning of that conduct assessment. The executive stared at him with an extremely severe look through her glasses, showing that she would not tolerate any jokes. Tae-ju approaches her calmly, greeting her, and asks what brings her so far from her sector. He comments on her recent promotion as the youngest manager of the group and notices that she is almost without guards there. The executive counters, saying that she does not need an escort in Allied territory, and asks if the young man intended to attack her. The young man denies it quickly, explaining that an executive of her level usually walks with many more support employees. She says the important matter was not for him, but decides to take advantage of the casual meeting to make some questions. She demands to know why the wounded ally is lying there and points out the contradictions found in old reports. The woman pressures him, wanting to know the reason for the lack of official reports, alerting about serious internal punishments. She reinforces that the young man's team has the mission of pacifying the area and that everyone at headquarters must be duly informed. The woman warns severely that his lack of knowledge is negligence and that she will register this as a refusal of report. A mysterious voice echoes suddenly from the surroundings, saying in a calm tone that such an attitude will not actually be necessary. The other executive appears, walking slowly, and states that all the answers are already in the report sent by him. The executive turns quickly upon hearing her companion's voice and is surprised by his unexpected intervention. He explains that he gathered statements from all members and that there is no more new information to be added there. The man offers to update her personally on the wounded man's state, and she ends up accepting his formal suggestion. The woman looks at her coworker with a suspicious gaze, trying to unravel his true intentions behind it. She reflects internally that the true pillar of support for that sector is precisely the executive Han Song-jae. She remembers rumors saying that the man had so much influence that even the general directors respected and feared him. He always showed himself extremely meticulous, analyzing reports and organizing his team with maximum efficiency of action. The man's greatest feat was keeping the feared Shindok Chil acting directly on the organization's battlefields. She admits in thought that his choices bring excellent results, that the company truly needs to grow. He resolved complex internal disputes, accumulating functions with mastery and conquering the respect of all the allies. The young woman looks at the horizon thoughtfully, wishing from the bottom of her heart to reach the same level of power and prestige as him. Abandoning the daydreams, she asks for updates on the wounded man, and the ally explains his old partnership with the team. He tells that the ally ended up getting involved with a rival company and that he was recently kidnapped in a mysterious action. He adds that they suspect the participation of Koi Dae Yap in the action, and the executive is quite intrigued by the rival's name. The man knows that mixing real facts with intelligent assumptions will make the investigator focus exactly where he wants. The executive reflects that the deplorable situation of the wounded man perfectly corroborates the thesis of violent kidnapping. She concludes that the enemy faction is the only one that would benefit from that capture, strengthening the version given by the colleague. She thanks him for his cooperation and bows respectfully before returning to the back seat of her luxury car. The executive says there is no more objection and that her exit will allow them to act with much more speed there. The man asks in a serious tone for the alley to notify him immediately if the enemy group makes any attack movement. The executive turns for an instant, maintaining a cold and determined countenance in the face of the dangers to come. The gray-haired young man only watches him in silence, aware of the great responsibilities that fall upon him now. She smiles slightly and comments to the young man that he seems much more mature and experienced since the last time they saw each other. The executive says goodbye, wishing him good luck on the mission, and the vehicle finally begins to move away slowly from there. The setting sun tinges the city sky with warm colors, bringing a mysterious climate of transition to that cold afternoon. Do-yoon walks furiously through the streets, grumbling about the escape of the prisoner whom he himself had tied up with such firmness. He concludes that someone planned the rescue in secret and curses for having slept too much and lost the chance to capture them. The young man feels a growing fury upon remembering that the criminals dared to hurt his dear and defenseless younger sister. The young man swears to himself that he will make each of those responsible pay with sweat for having messed with his family. Suddenly, a red-haired delinquent appears in his path, mocking his words in a quite mocking tone. The invader questions him with arrogance if no one taught him to keep his head down while walking through another gang's territory. Do-yoon is taken by surprise when the opponent advances in an extremely fast and nosy way in his direction on the street. The redhead jumps and throws a spectacular kick that hits the protagonist squarely in the chest, throwing him backward. The impact throws Do-yoon violently against the asphalt, making him slide for a few meters on the dark track of the alley. The attacker smiles with mockery, warning that he should have learned to respect the owners of that quiet neighborhood. Do-yoon leans on the floor with anger while listening to the opponent mock his unauthorized presence in that place. The redhead laughs insanely and demands by shouting that the young man hand over all the money he has in his pockets. Other delinquents appear right behind the red-haired leader, surrounding the protagonist, who continues in silence on the asphalt. The redhead looks at the young man with a sadistic gaze and asks if he really thinks he is dealing with a mere pickpocket. Do-yoon notices the adversary's school uniform and realizes that he is just a delinquent student from the region. The young man looks at him with disdain, concluding that the opponent is nothing more than a common delinquent wanting to play mobster. One in a green vest becomes deeply irritated upon being called a fake mobster by the young man. The delinquent questions what Do-yoon's problem is, since he was talking about Park Jong-hyen without hesitation moments before. The red-haired leader pokes his own temple, asking sarcastically if the protagonist is actually a bit slow in the head. The redhead faces him with seriousness, reminding him that that dangerous district is controlled entirely by his gang. Do-yoon responds in an extremely calm and short way, confirming that he already knows very well about that situation. The attacker realizes that talking will not help anything and decides to approach the young man to solve it with violence. He advances at high speed, yelling that in that district, attacking first is considered the only legitimate defense. The protagonist raises his fists in guard and accepts the challenge of fighting, saying that that rule applies to him too. The focus closes on a closed fist, moving rapidly through the dense darkness of that silent alley. Do-yoon dodges with mastery, deviating from the redhead's fast punch that grazes his left shoulder. The attacker widens his eyes, surprised upon realizing he missed the blow, and looks at the opponent apprehensively. The protagonist faces him with an extremely sharp look, preparing his immediate and precise counterattack. Do-yoon connects a powerful punch directly against the opponent's rib, making him feel the strength of the devastating impact. The young man deviates from another desperate blow by the redhead, keeping his absolute focus on each movement of the enemy. The redhead manages to connect a violent punch against Do-yoon's face, who feels the extreme strength of that unexpected attack. The strong impact throws the protagonist backward, making him stagger for the first time during that intense combat. The young man cleans the blood from his cheek and realizes that the redhead's physical strength is much superior to that of a common delinquent. The red-haired attacker smiles mockingly upon seeing that he managed to hit him and advances again with his sharp claws. He grabs Do Yoon's body from behind with great violence, trying to immobilize him to finish the fight once and for all. Both fight an intense battle of physical strength, with their feet dragging along the dark asphalt of that sidewalk. Do Yoon maintains his serious countenance, focused on finding an opening to escape that mortal hug of the enemy. The young man performs an acrobatic pirouette to free himself and delivers a precise kick against the adversary's chest. He lands in an extremely firm and agile way on the floor, preparing his next combat action from right there. The redhead praises Do Yoon's defense system, commenting with mockery that he dodges very well for a boy. He enters combat position again and warns that Do Yoon still does not have the right to act like a tough guy there. The protagonist analyzes the opponent's fluid rhythm, knowing that prolonging that battle will only put him at a disadvantage. The young man concludes that the red-haired enemy is not just a school bully, but a genuinely very strong warrior. Do Yoon remembers his experienced veteran's advice on how fights consist purely of pure psychology. The experienced fighter explained that one needs to use constant feints to force the adversary to commit a defense error. Young Do Yoon tried to apply the top blows, while the mentor dodged with extreme ease. The experienced warrior blocked the investitures and showed that an agile mind is more important than brute strength in a fight. He taught that switching hands at the exact moment of the attack creates an opening impossible to be defended by the enemy. The mentor stroked the boy's head, reinforcing that strategic intelligence always overcomes pure technique. Back to the present, Do Yoon recognizes the redhead's ability, but knows that he is definitely not an unbeatable rival. The opponent prepares to attack again, not knowing that the protagonist is about to change his combat strategy. The redhead impels his feet against the alley floor, starting a new and fast investiture against the protagonist. Do Yoon notices the strength of the enemy attack's pressure, which tries to crush him under an aggressive and frenetic rhythm. The adversary connects another powerful punch that hits the protagonist's guard, making him retreat a step. Do Yoon takes advantage of the moment to launch a fast counterattack, trying to hit the red-haired opponent's chin. The redhead deviates and praises his speed, admitting that the protagonist really has a lot of real combat experience. The opponent advances glued to his body and grumbles that his search for Park Ji-hyun is extremely suspicious. The delinquent redhead's eyes shine with a savage fury while he tries to deliver the decisive blow from up close. Do Yoon displays a smirk and counters, saying that subject's gang is equally suspicious in this whole story. The protagonist executes an extremely powerful knee blow against the rival's abdomen to break his attack posture. The red-haired opponent widens his eyes, feeling a sharp pain, and momentarily loses his breath due to the well-aimed blow. Do Yoon positions himself quickly, raising his right arm to throw a punch with all his accumulated strength. The delinquent redhead realizes too late that he fell into the psychological trap and looks at the rival's fist approaching his face. The protagonist throws his body forward, knowing that just one clean and precise punch is enough to turn the game around for good. Do Yoon's demolishing punch hits the red-haired adversary's face, throwing him violently against the asphalt. The other henchmen of the Green Vest gang watch that scene with their eyes widened and full of dread. Do Yoon watches him from above, knowing that the precision and strength of that movement reveal his long years of heavy training. The delinquent fallen on the floor realizes clearly that the black-haired young man is definitely not a common fighter. He feels like a fraud at the bottom of a well, realizing how much the outside world is much bigger and more dangerous. Do Yoon looks at the defeated enemy, wanting to make clear the enormous difference in level between them as a strong warning. The sunset light bathes the quiet alleys of that district, which now witnesses the outcome of that clash. The fallen redhead admits defeat in an honest way, accepting that he was surpassed in a totally fair and clean way. The protagonist approaches suddenly and grabs him firmly by the collar, preventing any escape attempt. The bloody delinquent gives a cynical smile and says that the young man can take his life if that is what he wants. Do Yoon lets go of his collar, commenting that beating someone up just for street talk is something he does not understand, the protagonist stays standing before the fallen opponent and suggests in a calm way that they talk civilly. The redhead asks, surprised, if that conversation would be man to man, and the young man jokes, saying maybe he hit him weakly. The protagonist states that is the winner of the combat. He dictates the rules, and the redhead really has no other choice there. The delinquent passes his hand over his bruised chin and asks with curiosity about what subject the young man wants to deal with. The protagonist faces him with seriousness, concentrating all his attention to obtain the answers he needs so much. He asks if the decision to cut ties with the old gang has any direct relation to the disappearance of Park Jong-hyun. He confesses that his goal is to dominate the district and move up in position by fighting against the other marginals of the neighborhood. He reveals that the real problem is not Park Jong-hyun but his feared right-hand man named Jang Man Jiu. The redhead explains that Jang Man Jiu was recruited by a large syndicate in high school but ended up demoted after losing. He highlights that that warrior is very strong, and his initial plan was to defeat him to gain respect in the faction. The protagonist asks how he knows all this, and the redhead answers that any local resident knows this story. He tells that formerly Park Jong-hyun was just a common marginal who moved up in position using very dirty methods. This act conquered the sympathy of the leaders, making him act as the owner of the place and stir up trouble with everyone in the area. The redhead points to his gang companions, stating that all of them also know perfectly about that past. He asks if the young man has any more questions, and Do-yoon says he needs only one more important information. Protagonist asks if he has seen the rival Choi Dae-yup around the region lately but receives a negative answer. Do-yoon considers himself satisfied with the answers obtained and decides to leave, calling his companions to accompany him. The red-haired delinquent asks, curiously, the reason for names so important in the underworld to be coming out of the young man's mouth. The protagonist looks back for an instant and answers in a cold way that he is simply not in the mood to tell. The redhead, unconvinced, asks how someone of the same age can be so strong even without having lived on the streets since little. Do-yoon continues walking backward and answers in a relaxed way that he himself tends to wonder about that. He turns slightly and questions why a talented young man like the redhead wastes time acting like a mere school bully. The protagonist suggests that maybe they are not as important as they think, or that city became too small for them. The red-haired attacker bites his lips thoughtfully upon hearing those deep words that stir his wounded pride. Next, he opens a wide and sarcastic smile, commenting in a mocking tone that the young man took a while to notice that the delinquent faces him with a challenging look and that limitations does not apply only to that small city. He finishes by saying with great conviction that warriors with their talent are indeed extremely rare in the whole country.